Description: what will happen if the quarrelsome girl, always going ahead, finally breaking free from everyone's hatred and contempt, returns to the very beginning? What will happen if this girl's best friend, sealed within her since birth, also returns with her? Chapters 15 to 20. Enjoy watching. Chapter 15. Hysterical. Minato sat in his office at the Hokage residence and thoughtfully looked through reports on the tasks completed over the past month. But the essence of the text he read did not want to fit into his head. The words seemed somehow meaningless, which is why they simply did not form into single sentences. They intertwined with completely extraneous thoughts slipping into the man's head, giving birth to something completely strange and incomprehensible, creating complete chaos. The reason for this state of the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village was a strong anxiety that gripped him headlong and literally shackled the man's heart. Something very similar, an almost tangible premonition of impending disaster. Minato, to his horror, already felt at once. This happened right before the start of the Third Shinobi World War, when all more or less capable students began to graduate from the academy as external students. Later it turned out that they were simply being prepared for war, recruiting cannon fodder into the orderly ranks of experienced shinobi. That is why, although Minato did not know what exactly, he was sure that something was definitely going to happen. And he sincerely hoped that this something had nothing to do with his beloved daughter. After all, this anxious feeling appeared in him precisely at the moment when she went to the reception at the Uchiha estate, and it only grew with each passing hour. True, at least a little, the father was still reassured by the realization that, in extreme cases, Naruto could use the technique of the God of Thunder, which she had already mastered quite well. It's no joke, but a girl at her age not only learned a Jonin-level technique, but also learned how to masterfully apply seals to use it. Of course, this was largely due to the blood of the Uzumaki clan, whose Fuinjutsu was the basis of this seal. This Whirlpool Village technique allowed the imprint of the chakra of the Thunder God using the technique to be sealed into it. And even taking this into account, for her age, Naruto, according to her father, was a truly brilliant child. However, the blonde didn't know for sure whether his daughter was connected with this anxiety, or whether his premonition of trouble spoke of something completely unrelated to her. So it turned out all Minato could do in this situation was sit and wait. Or, like crazy, rush around the entire village with Naruto under your arm, looking for something suspicious, guided only by some abstract fears. But this would most likely only lead him straight to a mental hospital. When Naruto, an hour after he left, all pale and barely able to stand, appeared next to Minato, accompanied by 3 representatives of the Uchiha clan, the blonde was not even surprised. Although the fact that his 8-year-old daughter was able to transport so many people at once with the help of the Thunder God's technique made him whistle to himself. For this required ideal concentration and simply enormous expenditure of chakra. However, from Naruto's haggard appearance it immediately became clear at least a drop of chakra and she will faint right there. The next thing the blonde thought about, looking at this strange company, was the reason why his daughter brought these 3 guys here in such a way. Literally only a few were aware that he taught her this technique of the second, and even those learned this by pure chance. The reason for such secrecy was the tactics chosen by Naruto. The girl did not want to show what she was capable of, even to the people closest to her, until she graduated from the academy, because what 2 people know, sooner or later a third one will know. And Naru really did not want to worsen the already bad relationships with her fellow students. And this fact already alarmed Minato, because without a good reason, Naruto would never have revealed her secret even to Sasuke, let alone Itachi and Sure Sway. By the way, the presence of the latter here gave the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village some not the most cheerful thoughts. Dad! Naruto cried out in fear and, finally releasing Itachi from her grip, rushed to her father. Daddy, you have to stop this. You are the Hokage! Grabbing him by the chest, with the last of her strength she began to shake the man who did not understand anything. I think it's late, Naruto. At the Uchiha estate, I sensed Obito's chakra approaching, that's why I hurried you. Kurama's voice quietly rang through her head, causing the blonde to flinch and look into her father's surprised face with widened eyes. Even if Minato went there now, Fugaku, Mikoto, and all the other Uchihas would be dead. He said with sorrow in his voice, realizing how painful it was to hear this for a girl who, over the past years, had come to love these people like her own family. This shouldn't have happened. Already quieter, choking on tears, the kunoichi muttered, burying her face in her father's chest, not believing that the massacre still happened. Naru, honey, what happened? The blonde asked softly, carefully stroking the golden crown of his sobbing daughter. But the girl didn't seem to hear anything. She, continuing to sob something inaudible, only pressed herself closer to her father's warm chest. Okay, maybe you can explain to me why my Naru is in this state? He asked the three guys more sternly, who froze like surprised statues a meter away from this surreal picture. Uncle Minato, we ourselves don't know what the reason is, Sasuke said plaintively, lowering his eyes to the floor. I don't even know how she got into our house and brought us here. The boy added in a slightly offended tone, clearly realizing that his girlfriend had secrets from him. Oh. Don't blame her for secrets, Sasuke, the blonde answered dejectedly, understanding the feelings of the boy who considered his daughter almost a sister. Naru did this at my insistence, because some of her secrets are also the secrets of the village, he said to the guy, noticing how tense Itachi and Shursui, who, unlike him, knew the secret of his daughter, tensed after these words, and looked inquisitively at his new ANBU captain. Hokage-sama, Naruto was transported to us using your Thunder God technique, the guy said clearly, dropping to one knee in front of his immediate superiors. Does she know the technique that made Uncle Minato nicknamed Konoha's Yellow Lightning? The younger Uchiha exclaimed in surprise, looking at his brother, who didn't even pay attention to his question. Yes, Sasuke, I taught it to Naru myself, but it's a secret for now. Winking at the boy, the man smiled and, looking at his brother, added, Itachi, you can stand up. And in general, call me Uncle Minato. Or just Minato. As you command, Hoka. Minato! Rising to his feet, he said in the same official tone. Naruto was clearly very scared about something. She grabbed my hand and started begging me not to do something. I honestly still don't understand what she was talking about, he reported. God, really? Having added up all the facts and finally understanding the reason, Minato muttered. Danzo had long suggested that he cleanse the Uchiha clan's quarter and thereby resolve the issue of their possible coup, but the man did not even suspect that this old man would bypass his decision and willfully do something so terrible. But how did Naruto know about the plans of the head of the root, and why did she decide that Itachi would carry out his order? After all, Danzo offered him a completely different candidate he didn't even imagine. Shursui, do you remember our conversation a couple of weeks ago? The blonde quietly asked the guy standing away from the brothers. Yes, Hokage-sama, but I don't understand. He spoke, but stopped mid-sentence, realizing exactly what Minato was driving at. Looks like we're late, the man said doomedly, realizing from the guy's rounded, frightened eyes that he understood everything. No, no, no! The girl cried again in her father's arms, hearing snippets of their conversation. Daddy, tell me that this is not true. Say that the Uchiha clan has not fallen. She howled, looking hopefully into the blonde's eyes with tear-stained eyes. What is it about? Itachi asked, shuddering, previously not understanding what his friend was talking about with the Hokage, and what kind of common affairs they had in general. I'll be right back and explain everything to you, he said as he exhaled and, hugging his sobbing daughter to himself, disappeared from the chair. Itachi, our clan, is he dead? The pale boy, about whom everyone had already forgotten, asked barely audibly. Mom and Dad. They don't. On the verge of hysteria, he squeezed out and looked at his older brother. Sasuke, I don't know. His brother answered him honestly, kneeling down in front of him and hugging him. I hope not yet, Shursui said just as quietly, watching as tears rolled down the brother's cheeks. Kakashi lay on the bed and once again reread Ika Ika Beirenchu, his favorite of Jiraiya's 3 published books. Lately, he's often spent his weekends like this. He simply didn't want to do anything else or see anyone, not even Minato and Naruto. After that information-gathering mission, the man hated himself even more and completely closed himself off. Considering that he shouldn't have left ANBU at all, because that's where people like him belong. No emotions, no regrets, only cold, darkness and seas of blood of those who did not like the owner. ANBU had no superiors, they had one single master who thought and lived for them, using his soldiers as dolls, and Kakashi was completely fine with this. Now he lived only on tasks, avoiding people, and hoped that one day Minato would understand what a mistake he had made in sending him into retirement, and would return his student to the ranks of ANBU. Although hiding from the omnipresent Naru, who managed to put her stamp on him, was more difficult than from everyone else. But even then the guy figured out how to get rid of her, telling the girl that her love for him complete nonsense, not worth a penny. True, the girl was not impressed by these words and announced with a smile that when she grew up, he himself would run after her. However, Kakashi hoped so. No, he was not going to run after his sensei's daughter. He wanted her to forget about him and find someone more suitable for her pure and innocent love, which he, stained from head to toe with blood, was unworthy of. Again you are reading this vulgarity, Kakashi. Minato's angry and cold voice was heard in the silence of the bedroom, causing the man to perk up, fearfully throw away the book, and jump out of bed. He developed this conditioned reflex during the time when he was still sitting with Naruto. He trained your beloved sensei well. The Nine-Tails chuckled at this in the blonde's head, but the crying Kunoichi didn't even pay attention to this attempt to bring her to her senses. Minato-sensei, what's wrong with Naru? He muttered questioningly when he saw the stern blonde man standing in front of him, clutching his only child to his chest. The man was clearly alarmed by something, and the baby in his arms was literally sobbing, seemingly not even noticing that they were already in a different place. There was a feeling that something had happened to this sunny, never-dull girl, and the person responsible was now going to pay for it. If it's because of my words, that's not what I meant at all, he said quickly, taking a couple of steps back, but ran into the wall. Ha! Naru, just look at this. The tent is resting. Kurama laughed, hoping to still bring his Jinchuriki to his senses. What other words? The blonde narrowed his eyes. Did you say something to my Naruto? He asked dryly. No, the man responded, waving his hands and with a forced smile, but noticing the angry look of his sensei, he immediately gave up. I said that her love is for me nonsense. He exhaled barely audibly. In vain, my girl really loves you, Minato chuckled mockingly, but then regained his serious appearance. Oh, he's really advocating for you and Kakashi to get married in the future. The fox shouted with exaggerated joy, hoping to at least restore Naruto's ability to think sensibly. Kurama, they're all dead. I couldn't save the Uchiha clan. How can I then save everyone else? Why do I need all this new life? The girl finally responded with sadness in her voice, continuing to sob. But then who dared? Kakashi immediately jumped up and shouted. I'll chop this man into a salad. The former ANBU captain said gloomily in a way that everyone in the room could understand he's not joking. What do you mean why? The tailed one snapped. Your father is alive. Itachi had nothing to do with the death of his clanmates. Kakashi is already ready to tear anyone apart for you. He growled in response to her words, which literally enraged him. Who told you that everything would be so simple? History, my dear, does not like to be changed. So be glad that at least something has changed for the better, he said ironically, hinting that not everything is so bad. I don't know exactly what happened, but it seems that the Uchiha clan fell after all. And Naru was there when it happened, Minato said sadly, looking into the eyes of the taken aback man. Using the God of Thunder technique, she brought Sasuke, Itachi and Shursui into my office, spending almost all her chakra on this, he said quietly with a hint that most likely no one else escaped from the Uchiha. Rejoice? Because they slaughtered an entire clan, but it wasn't the one you considered your brother who did it, right? The girl asked caustically. They shouldn't have died! She screamed hysterically again. They shouldn't die because of me. The girl screamed out loud, breaking free from her father's arms. Naruto, the father said worriedly, loosening his embrace so that the girl would not get hurt trying to get out of them. Naruto, Kakashi said with sorrow, looking at the tear-stained face of the one who always made him smile, even against his will, the one who could now barely stand on her feet and was paler than death, the one who should never have become like him. Yes. You yourself said that the dead will always live in your heart. The tailed one barked so that the weakened girl felt dizzy. You can cry, you can scream, but you won't be able to change this. Too much is tied to the fall of the Uchiha clan, and if you tried at least 100 times, Fugaku and Mikoto should have died as the instigators of the coup against the Hokage. He growled, trying to convey rather basic things to his Jinchuriki. You knew, the girl said with just her lips, starting to fall into oblivion, but before passing out, she felt the warm and so familiar embrace of her beloved sensei and a barely audible, regrettable, yes, from Kurama. Stay with her while I figure this out. Looking at his student, clutching the limp body of his 8-year-old daughter, Minato said quietly, asking him as a friend, and not ordering him. Of course, Minato-sensei, Kakashi agreed, nodding. When Naruto woke up, the first thing she saw was the platinum crown of her lover lying on the edge of her bed. The man himself sat in only his house pants on his knees next to her, and snored peacefully. Turning away, the kunoichi with slightly pink cheeks looked at the window, outside which the morning was just beginning to emerge. Weak orange rays of the sun modestly spread across Konoha, as if they were afraid to disturb someone. They climbed into the slightly open windows and woke up the early birds so that they could make people happy with their songs. Naruto smiled sadly at the gentle sun, which hugged her so softly and warmly with its rays, and turned away. Despite such a morning, the kunoichi's soul was scratching, and tears were welling up in her eyes again. The Uchiha clan has fallen. It was already a fait accompli now and at this time. No, the blonde understood that Kurama was right about something and it would be worth finding at least something good in what happened that night, but her heart refused to do so. She was going to save everyone, but as usual she forgot one very important thing: it is simply impossible to save everyone. This was proven to her by the Fourth Shinobi World War, where, in addition to hundreds of strangers, those close to her, Niji, Shikaku and Inoichi, died. Naru, are you awake yet? Kakashi asked softly and slightly sleepily. Yes, Kakashi-sensei, the kunoichi in the body of an 8-year-old girl said in a dead voice with sobs. You should calm down, Naruto. Gently touching her cheek with his palm, he wiped away a tear with his thumb and gently turned the girl's face towards him. My bride cannot be so tearful when she is next to her groom. With a slight smile visible through the black mask, he said at the moment to the blushing girl. What a fox! He knows how to cheer you up. Kurama chuckled in her head, but unlike his usual behavior, now there was no mockery or sarcasm in his voice. He seemed glad that the copy ninja said this. Thank you, but this won't help. I'm guilty of people's deaths, the girl exclaimed hotly, looking straight into the man's eyes. It's not your fault, Naruto, he said, shaking his head negatively. You're just an 8-year-old girl, you're simply not capable of this yet. But in the future, the man said with a smile, trying to be encouraging. You do not understand, covering her face with her hands to hide the tears rolling down her cheeks again, the girl answered. I do not dare! Kurama barked from the prompter booth, deciding that she was going to tell Kakashi about their time travel. Don't drift, fox face, I'm not going to tell him anything. As if reading his thoughts, the girl snorted sourly. When I was walking to the Uchiha estate, I met an ANBU member from Root wearing a dog mask. The blonde said dryly, looking somewhere into the gloomy morning emptiness. But why did you decide that he was from the Root? Kakashi asked incomprehensibly, looking at the thoughtful girl. When I introduced myself, he took out a sword and pointed it at me, the kunoichi said, shrugging her shoulders. And also, when he took it out, I noticed a black jacket reaching to his stomach and red belts on his shoulders, the unspoken form of ANBU Root, the girl added quietly, speaking softly to the shocked guy. And even in this state you don't forget to mock. Unable to bear it, Kurama, who had been silent until then, burst out laughing, seeing the man's elongated face. "This is for what he said to me then," muttered the blonde, who seemed to have slightly recovered from her hysterical state thanks to the conversation with Kakashi. "It's not for nothing that Sai once rinsed my brains with this root of his." She chuckled. "But where are you from?" the copy ninja said in surprise. "That's where I learned about Danzo's plan." The girl waved it off, remembering her emotionless friend. "Basically, I shouldn't have been transported to Itachi. I should have gone straight to my father. If only I had done this," she said sadly, looking at her hands. "Why did you go to Itachi?" asked Kakashi, beginning to understand why Naruto was in such a state yesterday and finally fainted due to fatigue. "Honestly, I thought that Danzo would order him to do this, for the benefit of the entire village," Nara said with a shrug. "Firstly, he is strong enough, and secondly, a coup would lead the village to an internal war, and Itachi, due to his character, would choose the option with fewer casualties, that is, the fall of his clan." As she spoke, the girl's tone evened out, and her eyes dried up, as if this hysteria had never happened. "I see. As always, you were able to surprise me," Kakashi said, and then felt a hug around his neck. "Tell me, you will never leave me, will you?" Naruto asked, cuddling up to the one she had loved for a combined 13 years. "Can you really get away from you?" The man laughed at her words, hugging her back. Chapter 16 Naruto-style final exam. Naruto sat alone on a swing under an old tree in the courtyard of the Shinobi Academy with a thoughtful look and looked blankly at the crowd gathered at the main gate. Today was the final exam, which she, unlike the others, again failed miserably, temporarily remaining in the second year. However, the girl knew for sure that she would complete her studies within the walls of this building today, passing the exam a little later, in the evening forest, outside of Konoha. Happy students swarming at the entrance squealed joyfully, telling equally happy parents about their successes, and showed off brand new forehead protectors. This, like last time, irritated the girl, because none of the students with whom she spent 8 years even noticed that she had failed. Sasuke, Shika, and Chuji did not count, because these three, like most of her future friends, were assigned to take the exam only tomorrow, with the second half of the class. Nero herself persuaded them not to come, saying that they should better prepare and rest before their test, and not hang around her. Parents, in turn, proudly praised their children, sometimes casting cold and even some kind of malicious glances towards the lonely blonde. True, this time no one dared to even mention in a whisper that she, the little monster, should not become a ninja, because this could entail the wrath of the Hokage. Minato, who, to the surprise of many, did not come today to support his beloved daughter, has proven more than once that saying something bad about his child is fraught. But the girl herself was incredibly glad that her father had to leave urgently. After all, if Minato had found out that his brilliant daughter, on a whim, that it would have been obvious for him and all her immediate circle, had failed the final exam, it would have ended extremely pitifully for Naruto. Let him better read about what happened later, when he returns, because by that time, she will definitely receive her Leaf Shinobi headband, which will, at least a little, pacify his ardor. Noticing another look of coldness and hostility, Naruto lowered her eyes and sighed heavily. With every minute the wait became more and more boring, and her carefully maintained mask of sadness and doom was cracking at the seams, letting irritation pass through. Of course, this time Naruto failed, exposing herself as a complete failure on purpose. Having grimaced a little, having wasted too much chakra, she created something jelly-like and extremely vile, only from a distance reminiscent of a sunny blonde. Actually, after this, Sairaka, with a heavy sigh, informed her about the complete failure, and the girl, under Kurama's cackling, hid her face behind her long hair and slowly walked away from the audience. From the outside it should have looked like she was upset and was barely holding back tears, not wanting to cry in front of the sensei who was taking her exam. But in fact, everything was exactly the opposite. The kunoichi could barely restrain the laughter rolling up her throat, ignoring the sarcastic comments from the prompter booth in the background. Remembering what happened on that day in her past life, the blonde held on stoically so as not to break into a run and leave the audience with wild laughter. Mentally promising his tenant, who had gone too far with his jokes, a quick reprisal. After all, because of the ironic remarks of the Ninetales about the faces of her sensei at the moment the jelly-like something appeared in the room, it was much more difficult for her to restrain herself. And to fail in this situation was akin to the failure of the operation that she and Kurama had been planning for the last month, carefully thinking through what her illusory clone would look like, which could not be allowed to happen. For, in the opinion of both conspirators, it is better to pick off the abscess now than to wait until the limbs have to be amputated because of it. And Naruto knew for sure that Mizuki, at first glance, is one of the kindest and most loyal sensei of the academy, a dirty traitor who could do something truly terrible if he is not stopped in time. After all, the person who took advantage of the naivety of a lonely child, forcing him to steal the secret scroll of the village in order to join Orochimaru in the future, in her opinion, had neither conscience nor heart. But it would be extremely stupid on her part to openly talk about this, because everyone except this traitor would consider her words another joke. However, that's not what Naruto was thinking about right now. All her thoughts were occupied by the changes that had occurred over the 5 long years that had passed since the fall of the Uchiha clan. For the first month, the girl refused to leave the house or meet anyone at all. She motivated her behavior by nervous exhaustion, weakness, fear, and guilt, which literally ate her up when she saw the Uchiha brothers. Minato believed, worried about his only daughter, but still a month later he forced her to return to the academy. There, the kunoichi simply withdrew into herself, spending whole days in her inner world with Kurama, who silently watched the self-flagellation of his Jinchuriki. No, he, of course, was worried, but he himself too keenly felt his involvement in her condition, so he silently endured the depression of his vessel. Sasuke, Shika, and Shuji, despite all this, were there and supported her, which made the poor girl feel even worse, because one of them lost his entire family and instead of grieving, he supported the one who, albeit indirectly, was still to blame. Naruto was saved from prolonged depression, oddly enough, by the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. He, having accidentally met the daughter of his successor, in some way unknown to her, pulled out everything that had been gnawing the girl from the inside for the last 6 months. This smiling old man managed to do something that neither her father, nor her friends, nor the Ninetales could do. Namely, straighten the kunoichi's brains. He told her about how during the mission, because of his own mistake, his eldest son and daughter-in-law died, leaving his 1-year-old son orphan. He said that the post of Hokage, which she so longs to occupy, always implies a risk for the lives of the inhabitants of the village for which he is responsible. And finally, he explained that even knowing about Danzo's plan, Minato himself would not be able to change anything. Danzo thought through everything to the smallest detail, hiring for dirty work a certain organization consisting of Nukunin called Akatsuki, which was covered by members of the ANBU route. When the blonde asked the reason for such revelations, he said that he would rather tell her all the secrets of Konoha than not watch as the heiress of the Will of Fire burns herself from the inside. The next day, Naruto returned to her normal self and began counting down the days until she could officially wipe one vile old man off the face of the earth. And she didn't care that he did everything for Konoha, because this man never forgot his personal interests and ambitions. Then everything began to spin and spin at the speed of light, and the next 4 years passed in transit past the future heroine of the Fourth Shinobi World War. Naruto diligently trained her child's body almost every day, wanting to get it into her 18-year-old form as quickly as possible. Under the strict guidance of Minato, with the help of notes that once belonged to Kushina, the girl, and the strictest confidence from everyone, began to study the basics of Fuinjutsu of the Whirlpool clan. She also continued to play eternal catch-up with Kakashi, who, after the incident with the Uchiha clan, or rather their subsequent morning conversation, began to avoid the blonde even more. What was the reason for this? Neither the girl nor her father knew, although given the thoughtfulness of Minato, which appeared every time the conversation turned to his student, it was possible to argue. But whatever one may say, on his legal days off the copy ninja practically did not show up in Konoha, showing up at his apartment only late at night and leaving before dawn. Naruto did not forget to sometimes play pranks with a group of boys from the academy, each time confirming her rightful title as a little trickster. And of course, she spent every single day at the academy in the company of Shiki, Chuji, and Sasuke. From the outside it might seem that her first and best friend had not changed at all, but Naruto could see perfectly well that he was gradually closing himself off from everyone, including his brother and herself. But the most unpleasant thing was to see in his eyes hatred, contempt, and an almost tangible desire for revenge on the one who destroyed his clan. And what to do with all this? I couldn't imagine a kunoichi in the body of a child. Fortunately, at least he was still just as gentle towards her, listening to words and advice. Naruto spent her final year at the academy with the Nine Tails, methodically going through every little detail that they remembered from their past life. The whole point was that almost immediately after graduation, problems should have rained down on her blonde head as if from a cornucopia. And oddly enough, similar, almost imperceptible details led to them. The first of them was the final exam itself, or rather what was supposed to happen to her immediately after his failure. Kurama often called Naruto, and, remembering how easily she believed Mizuki and stole the secret scroll, the girl completely agreed with him. Who could have thought of arranging such a test for a child unable to pass the simple genin exam? Who could possibly believe such nonsense? And why didn't the girl ask these questions much earlier? In her past life, Naruto, an uncertain male voice was heard, tearing the blonde, who was slowly swinging on a swing, out of her thoughts. "Remember the ray, here comes the sun!" The tailed trickster laughed in her head. "Get ready, Naru, now this genius will hang tons of noodles on your ears." He laughed ironically, hinting at her and his mental abilities. "Yes, I know." The kunoichi snorted angrily, remembering the theater of the absurd that happened last time. "Mizuki-sensei?" she asked out loud in surprise, looking at the man in front of her, naively batting her fluffy eyelashes. Young, quite handsome, with bright green eyes and platinum hair with a slight hint of blue that reaches his shoulders, and a bandana-like forehead protector. He smiled affably, slightly sympathetically at the girl in front of him, as if he really regretted that she never became a full-fledged shinobi. "I have a serious conversation with you, Naruto," the man said slightly hesitantly, examining the trusting face of the one whom he despised with all his heart. Iruka stood in front of the entrance to the Hokage's residence, and listened in horror to the whispers of the others. When an alarmed Mizuki came running to him half an hour ago and told him about an emergency meeting, he could not even imagine that everything would turn out like this. For some reason, Naruto stole a scroll with jutsu forbidden by the previous Hokage. And this happened exactly when her father, the current Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village, left. If this scroll falls into the wrong hands, it can cause a lot of trouble, Minato's predecessor as Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, said loudly, finally coming out to the excited shinobi. "This time she won't get away with it, even considering whose daughter she is." One of those gathered shouted loudly, causing the others to cackle in approval, causing Iruka to flinch and Sarutobi to sigh heavily. "Several hours have passed since the scroll was stolen," the former Hokage continued sternly, interrupting all other conversations with his loud voice. "Naruto needs to be found as quickly as possible." He drawled more quietly, watching the shinobi's eyes light up with hatred. "But keep in mind that not even a hair should fall from this girl's head," the old man barked, looking sternly at the silent men. "Eat!" The voices of more than a dozen ninjas were heard in chorus around the area, and a second later Hiruzen was left completely alone at the gates of the Hokage residence. "Why did you do this, Naruto?" the former Kage of the Leaf Village asked himself barely audibly, and turned around and headed back into the building. "I'm already tired of waiting," the shabby blonde girl drawled offendedly, lounging right on the ground in an embrace with a large scroll. "RR. Calm down, Naruto. Better repeat the shadow cloning technique one more time." The Nine Tails laughed ironically, who was already tired from the long wait. "You're kidding me!" The kunoichi snapped, abruptly sitting down in the lotus position. "I've used this technique 1,000,000 times already," she snorted, hinting at her past life, where clones saved her life more than once or twice. "You know very well that this damn scroll basically didn't give up to me." The girl drawled ironically, examining the intricate design on the outside of the whistle. And in general, over the past couple of hours I have already practiced enough in creating clones. I even remembered a harem, the girl muttered, pouting like a little hamster, picking at the dirt on the orange trouser leg of her overalls with her finger. It was an exact copy of what the blonde had worn in her previous life, with one small exception. This one was exactly her size, hugging the young kunoichi's body tightly. Minato, to the surprise of Naru, who was already used to dresses, sundresses and other girly nonsense, bought it for his daughter about a year before graduating from the academy. Having said that, until she becomes an experienced shinobi, it is better to wear something like this. Yes, I know. I myself already have to wait for this would-be traitor and your stupid sensei. The tailed one chuckled and, judging by the sounds, exhaled slightly irritably. I can't understand what this guy was trying to achieve by leaving you alone with a scroll that hides forbidden techniques. And in general, why did shadow cloning suddenly become a forbidden technique along with the rest of the garbage in this scroll? He lazily drawled and yawned, seeming to decide that it would not hurt him to take a nap. It's true. The girl, whom the tailed man had infected with drowsiness, responded through a yawn. Hey! I found you! Her sensei's voice sternly barked from behind her, causing the almost dozing girl to flinch and jump to her feet and turn to him. Why are you so rumpled? Having examined his student from head to toe, the man asked curiously. Does he have so many possible answers? The Nine-Tails laughed sarcastically, waking up from a light slumber together with his jinchuriki. Sits, fox face. The girl somehow too joyfully shouted at her lodger, sensing that the most interesting thing was finally approaching. Hee hee! You caught me, I only managed to learn one jutsu! The girl laughed, at first glance becoming more relaxed. In reality, she was trying to sense Mizuki's approach. I'll show it to you now. If it works, will you give me a grade? The blonde asked hopefully, taking a well-known pose. Irika shuddered and once again examined the battered student, not believing that the girl could really bring herself to such a state with training. However, the training had nothing to do with it. Naru just lay on the ground for about half an hour, fighting with her own double. Naruto, where did you get this scroll? Sensei asked as expected for her. This? She asked cheerfully and, waiting for a nod, continued, Mizuki-sensei told me about it. About this place, by the way, too, she announced happily. He said that if I show you this jutsu, you will definitely pass my exam. Naruto smiled, feeling the rapid approach of the chakra of the culprit of this performance, while Irika fell into something akin to a stupor, because Mizuki had been his best friend since childhood. How harmoniously you play the role, Kurama noted with a certain amount of mockery, distracting the girl at the most inopportune moment. The next second, a dozen kunai flew at the blonde and her first sensei. The man, instantly coming to his senses, forcefully pushed the girl aside, not allowing her to save them both from injury. And he and Kurama thought through their every step in advance in order to avoid blood. And again, all their efforts were in vain. You found it, well done! A platinum blonde who appeared on a massive branch dryly praised his friend. I see. So that's what it's all about, Irika said hoarsely, covering his deepest wound with his hand. Naruto, give me the scroll, Mizuki said, ignoring his friend's words, turning to the blonde. Hey, the girl shook her head and shouted. What's going on here? Rising from her fifth point, where she fell after the sensei threw her aside, the girl drawled, ruffling her long, tangled hair at the back of her head even more. Naruto, no! Don't you dare give him this scroll! Irika shouted. It is very dangerous, forbidden jutsu are hidden in it. With a bit of fear, he said quickly and, looking hopefully at his student, added, Mizuki used you to get it. Naruto, you don't need this scroll, I'll tell you the whole truth. Mizuki responded mockingly, interrupting his former friend's monologue. What? No, don't. Immediately realizing what was going on, Irika shouted with all his might. 13 years ago, Mizuki continued without paying the slightest attention to the shout. You know the story about how the fox demon was imprisoned, right? The man asked curiously, turning to the surprised girl. However, the surprise was only on her face. In fact, she dreamed of how to give in to this arrogant schemer. On that day, a new law was adopted in the village. The blonde chuckled, glancing sideways at his drooping colleague. Law? Under the irritated growl of a disagreeing Kurama, Naru asked for formality, deciding to play along a little. You know, Naruto, this law should have remained a secret from you forever. Mizuki laughed disgustingly, looking down at his victim. What law? And why from me? The blonde asked without much enthusiasm, feeling how it was starting to get boring. This law states, never tell Naruto that she is the demon fox. The blonde drawled contentedly, looking at the girl with her head down. Hey Naru, it turns out that your daddy broke the law. The tailed one neighed from the prompter's booth, causing his Jinchuriki to shudder in silent laughter. Fortunately, thanks to his hair, no one saw it. Stop it! Iruka shouted again. You the nine-tailed fox demon who killed Iruka's parents and almost destroyed the village, Mizuki drawled, deciding that the child in front of him was in a stupor because of the news. I heard that, according to him, you are me, and I am you. Kurama laughed, unable to contain himself due to the stupidity of this man. Your beloved daddy, Naruto, imprisoned it in you. The blonde continued to speak mockingly. They all lied to you. He shouted, slowly pulling out a large shuriken from behind his back. Have you ever wondered why everyone hates you so much? And Iruka is exactly the same. He hates you with all his heart. Looking at his former friend, the platinum blonde laughed and added something that infuriated the kunoichi. Nobody needs you. Not even your daddy, who is next to you and plays at taking care only because of fear of the nine tails. I was thinking maybe this time we can do without catching up. The fox snorted in the blonde's head, feeling that this chatter was crossing all boundaries of what was permitted. I'm already tired of listening to this nonsense, he growled, knowing that if it were up to him, this freak would already be dead. Naruto, that's not true. And I, and especially Minato-sama, don't hate you, Iruka said quietly, looking at the completely dejected girl. Is that all you wanted to tell me? Unexpectedly for everyone, Naru inquired in a mocking voice, raised her head, and with a wide smile looked at the astonished man who was preparing to throw shuriken at the shocked girl, in his opinion. What? He mumbled incomprehensibly and, like Iruka, stared at her as if she were the eighth wonder of the world. Let me disappoint you, Mizuki-sensei, that I learned that I am the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. I learned at the age of 3 from my beloved father. The blonde snorted, piercing him with a mocking look. And Iruka-sensei, unlike you, is smart. He understands perfectly well that it's not me who is to blame for the death of his parents, but the biju that sits inside me, like in a cage. She chuckled, getting back into position to perform the shadow cloning jutsu. Yes, you are a born speaker, Kurama growled approvingly. Well, okay. Moving away from the shock, Mizuki chuckled. Then I will kill both you and him, he said, throwing the shuriken towards Iruka. The next second, his shuriken was knocked down by a bizarrely shaped kunai, and Naru somehow found herself in front of her sensei. How? He staggered to the side and mumbled. Oh, this? The kunoichi waved her hand and smiled. The Thunder God technique that Dad taught me. She grinned and, turning back, quietly asked, Are you okay, Iruka-sensei? Yes, the taken aback man quietly responded, already completely confused in what was happening. Shut up. I tie brats like you into a knot with my left hand. The shinobi hissed angrily, pulling out a second shuriken from behind his back. Well, I'll beat you up so that your own mother won't know, the girl said dryly, feeling how deep inside Kurama nodded in agreement, fully supporting her words. Shadow cloning technique, the blonde said loudly, and the entire clearing was instantly filled with her exact copies. Same, Iruka whistled softly behind her. How so? Shuddering, the shy Mizuki mumbled. Well, what about you? Naruto laughed. They wanted to defeat me, but you yourself stand there, she chuckled. Then I guess I'll start first, 10 minutes later. Looks like I went a little overboard, the blonde said, smiling shyly as she approached her sensei. Naruto, come closer, I have something for you. Iruka smiled at her, and the girl was instantly nearby. Close eyes, the man said quietly. Happy to finally have this thing? The Ninetales chuckled good-naturedly as his Jinchuriki waited with her eyes closed for the shinobi forehead protector to be put on her. Yes, Kurama! She giggled in response. Can you open it already? The blonde said hesitantly out loud. Yes, you can, Sensei said good-naturedly. Congratulations on your graduation, Naruto Namikaze, he said with a wide smile, looking at his most restless student. Let's go celebrate. I'll treat you to ramen. He laughed, trying to smooth out the awkwardness, and the girl, no longer listening to the words, threw herself on his neck, wanting to hug the one who, both in the past and in this life, accepted her as a person, despite the bijou imprisoned inside. Chapter 17, Team Number 7. Minato was simply beside himself with anger. As soon as he returned from a trip planned 6 months ago with the daimyo of the Land of Fire, which, by the way, he tried in every possible way to reschedule because of his daughter's final exam, he was told simply unimaginable news. Naruto failed the exam, stole a scroll with forbidden techniques from the vault, and beat one of her sensei half to death. However, Hiruzen, who came after the speaker, slightly tempered his ardor, telling his angry father what the poor private did not have time to finish due to fear of the evil Hokage. From what his predecessor as Kage said, Minato realized that Mizuki, who was beaten by Naruto, was using his daughter to steal the scroll, planning to simply get rid of her afterwards. And the girl herself protected the secret scroll, herself and even Iruka, who, by the will of fate, found the girl in the forest before the villain. It's not to say that this news greatly surprised the blonde, because Mizuki, while still an ordinary shinobi, acted extremely cruelly, showing excessive ambition and ambitiousness. A striking example of this was the incident that forced the previous Hokage, the elders and Minato himself to deny him a promotion. Mizuki didn't just throw his comrade who was wounded in the leg during a mission, he killed him in cold blood in the best ANBU traditions. But he was definitely not suitable for the role of a member of this elite squad, because even the members of the route would not kill one of their own without a direct order. This man is on his own mind, and the fact that he used the Hokage's young daughter, the Jinchuriki of the Ninetales, to achieve his goal, proved this. But the problem that bothered Minato was somewhat different. Neris simply could not accidentally fail her long-awaited final exam. For all her frivolity, nonsense and troll habits, she was a surprisingly smart and gifted child. In addition, since childhood, this girl dreamed of becoming the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village, and the first step towards this was graduating from the Shinobi Academy. And this fact was already leading the blonde to certain thoughts, whether he liked them or not a separate question. Daddy? The door to the Hokage's office swung open with a noise, and a happy, disheveled girl of 13 years old in a bright orange jumpsuit appeared on the threshold. You've finally returned home, shouted his small female counterpart, throwing herself on her father's neck. Can you imagine? I'm now a real genin. I even have a headband, the girl sang proudly, Minato's soul in her surprisingly strong embrace. But you failed your exam, the blonde drawled questioningly, gently pushing his daughter away from him. Or am I wrong? Minato asked, looking down at her, adding a little sternness to his voice. Looks like that old man didn't tell him. Kurama laughed in the blonde's head, finding this whole situation extremely comical. Shut up, fox face! The girl growled and, putting on the most innocent expression on her face, looked at her father. Didn't Grandpa Hiruzen tell you? Naruto asked in surprise, batting her fluffy eyelashes. I learned the shadow cloning technique from that forbidden scroll and with its help. The kunoichi suddenly fell silent and lowered her head, hiding her face behind her long hair. With her help what? Minato asked carefully, probably seeing his daughter so indecisive for the first time in her life. Even when the Uchiha clan fell and Naruto plunged into depression, she was frank with him, telling him everything that was on her soul. I punished Mizuki-sensei, the blonde said quietly but firmly, still not raising her head. And she did the right thing. It is because of such pathetic little people that the tailed beasts, and their Jinchuriki suffer almost their entire lives. Kurama exhaled irritably and, grunting, added, "And if the humans lived only one life in hatred, the Biju felt all this persecution for centuries." Punished? Raising his eyebrows, Minato repeated in surprise. Nara at that moment reminded him of her mother, when she was still studying at the Shinobi Academy. Clenched fists, a cold, firm voice, and not a drop of regret. Kushina behaved exactly the same way when she explained to her sensei about her next fight. They provoked her, calling her an outsider, teasing her because of her beautiful scarlet hair, trying to humiliate and bully her when she showed the best results in the class. He said terrible things, Dad, Naruto breathed, interrupting the flow of his memories. He said that because of the 9 tails sealed inside me, I am a monster myself. The girl cried out, looking up at her father. He said that neither you nor Irika-sensei love me, despising and hating me deep inside. Continuing to scream hysterically, she said to the applause of her tenant. He and Nara both understood perfectly well if you don't immediately switch Minato's attention, he will definitely start asking unnecessary questions. After all, the father knew too well that his daughter could not simply fail the exam leading to her blue dream. So this is what he told you? The Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village said in a voice soaked in anger. Looks like something extremely interesting is in store for this freak. Kurama laughed ironically, feeling a flock of goosebumps run down the back of his Jinchuriki. Maybe I shouldn't, the kunoichi asked slightly sympathetically, feeling partly guilty of what would happen to Mizuki. Stop sympathy, or have you forgotten what he told you and how he wanted to use you? The tailed one caustically asked the girl, nipping all her regrets in the bud. You are right. Naruto agreed reluctantly, realizing that the 9 tails were right 1,000 times over and her sensei was to blame for everything. So you've learned the shadow cloning technique? Meanwhile, having recovered from his irritation, the father asked with a smile. Will you show it to Daddy? Naruto sat in the audience and looked at her overexcited classmates with an indifferent look. All of them, as one, rejoiced at passing the exam and becoming full-fledged genin, without even imagining what awaited them ahead. Akatsuki with their overly cruel actions, Obito with his completely leaking roof, and of course, Madara, who fell into insanity long before their birth. But the worst thing of all, the upcoming war, which will take place in any case. History does not like changes, it can only be made a little less bloody, this Naruto, to his horror, nevertheless understood. Without Kurama's words, she realized this, having felt it herself when she could not save the Uchiha clan from falling. Next to her at the desk sat the same quiet and thoughtful Sasuke. As the blonde expected, all her friends, both present and future, passed the exams with ease. But what surprised the girl, they somehow found out that she herself failed it. The Uchiha brothers, Shika and even Chuji came to her in the evening, after their exam, and the only thing that saved her from reprisal was the fact that Minato was there and the forehead protector that Irika gave her. Hey Naruto, what are you doing here? You didn't pass. A suspiciously familiar boyish voice exclaimed in surprise right next to her ear. Or was it your daddy who helped? He laughed, causing the girl to snort and Sasuke, who was sitting next to him, to exhale in irritation. She retested with me and Shikamaru. The brunette answered dryly when Nara had already turned to the irritant to explain that she shouldn't talk to her like that. Wow, I see your friend has become a little more emotional. They laughed sarcastically from the prompter booth in the kunoichi's head, causing her whitish eyebrows to frown slightly. The guy standing right in front of her was, to put it mildly, taken aback. Sharp black eyes with a vertical pupil were rounded, and the smile that was always playing on the face and revealing sharp fangs slipped from the face. He laughed nervously, and ran his hand with sharp claw-like nails into his brown hair and began to ruffle it. Even the red fangs painted on his cheeks seemed to be slightly curved, changing their usual even shape due to the loss of the usually carefree expression on the owner's face. Yes, I just asked, the guy squeezed out embarrassedly after a short pause and then, again smiling cheekily, added, Congratulations, Naru. Thank you, Kiba. The blonde answered seductively, languidly, shooting in his direction with slightly closed blue eyes, causing the guy in a jacket with a fur hood to immediately blush and hasten to retreat, and Sasuke chuckled mockingly after him. Growing! The Ninetales laughed in her head. It's only the beginning, the blonde proudly sang back to him, straightening a stray strand. Still, your dad made a girl out of a tomboy. Kurama chuckled mockingly and immediately changed the topic, fearing that his Jinchuriki would again perceive his words as another mockery. Minato never told about your team and your mentor. And since we have already changed history, perhaps something will go differently now, he said more seriously. I know. But still, I hope that we will all be distributed the same way as the first time. Neru spoke more cheerfully than she should have, but was interrupted. Naruto, come on, get out of here, the pink-haired girl said in a confident tone, looming over the one she considered her worst enemy. What? Looking stupidly at Sakura, she asked Neru again, looking at the girl in disbelief, who would become her best friend in the future. It seems that something in all possible versions of history will remain the same, the Ninetales drawled ironically, hinting at the impudence of one pink-haired girl. Kurama, what are you talking about? Slowly starting to lose her temper, the kunoichi nervously repeated her question, continuing to look at Haruno like a ram at a new gate. What do you want? Once again, instead of his girlfriend, the Uchiha chuckled, looking at the blonde, frozen like a statue to herself. Sasuke, can I sit next to you today? The girl asked, impudently pushing the blonde out of the way, finding herself next to the object of her admiration, and without waiting for an answer, sat down in Naruto's place. Sakura! The kunoichi barked to herself, rubbing her bruised shoulder. Here you go! Swallowing a curse, she hissed, glancing sideways at the girl, who was examining the gloomy Uchiha as if he were some kind of museum exhibit. Come on! I remember that it was on this day in your past life that you had your first kiss, the fox said mockingly and ironically asked. Perhaps you can repeat it, Fuck you, fox face! Naruto barked at him and, frowning, lay down on her desk, listening to all the girls in the class cursing Sakura, who was too insolent. After a long lunch break, Sasuke slowly walked along the small alley leading to the main building of the Shinobi Academy. Even at the beginning of this break, Naruto ran away somewhere, citing urgent matters, and swore that she would return straight to the audience, exactly at the beginning of the second part. But the younger Uchiha was tormented by a rather obvious guess: this cantankerous girl is again preparing some kind of dirty trick, only this time for her new mentor. However, Sasuke liked her sense of humor and antics that could make even a dead man laugh. And taking into account the fact that they still have to sit there for oh how long, the guy was even happy about it. Throughout the first half of the day, Irika-sensei read a long lecture to his former students about the responsibility and complexity of their chosen profession, about the intricacies of working as a team when carrying out missions and the importance of accurately following all orders of the mentor. He also said that all graduating students were divided into teams of 3 and an experienced jounin was assigned to them as an instructor. The same person, with whom each of the groups was supposed to be introduced after lunch, will become the group leader while completing simple, but already full-fledged tasks. But Sasuke himself already knew all this, so he was frankly bored during this long lecture from Irika. The only thing that surprised him, and one might say, pleased him during this lecture, was that he and Naruto ended up on the same team, number 7. The only downside was that along with them, instead of Shiki or Tsuji, to whom he had become more or less accustomed, Sakura Haruno joined this team. This girl, as far as he remembered, together with her friend Ino, ruined Neru's life for almost the entire training at the academy and hung herself on him. But despite this, his friend treated this hatred philosophically, believing that in the future all these feelings could become the basis for strong friendship. It was for this attitude that he loved this sunny blonde. Never discouraged, kind, incredibly sincere and incredibly strong, Naruto loved the village, in which most of the inhabitants, for some unknown reason, hated and despised her. She did not want revenge, assuring everyone around her that someday all these people would recognize her and accept her. He himself was weak, unable to forgive the murder of his parents, sometimes despising even the person dearest to himself, Itachi, who did not want to take revenge. Stopping, Sasuke leaned against one of the trees and closed his eyes, trying to let go of his hatred. At times, when he remembered what happened 5 long years ago, she filled his entire heart, forcing him to distance himself from the people dear to him and desire only one thing: powers. Now was not the time or place for this. Naruto should not have seen him so pathetic. Now he had to get ready and calmly return to the classroom in the main building, where the teams will finally be announced, their mentors, who must train the younger generation of ninjas. Sasuke. The guy suddenly opened his eyes and looked at a pink-haired girl sitting on a bench who was waving at him. "Maybe we can go to the classroom together?" she asked with a wide smile and reddened cheeks, causing him slight irritation and interest. "Sakura, can I ask you something?" Coming a little closer, the brunette asked and sat down next to the blushing girl on the bench. "About what?" she asked enthusiastically, ready to tell him anything he wanted. "What do you think about Naruto?" Looking into her face, Sasuke asked quietly, wanting to understand why she disliked his friend so much. After all, he couldn't be the only reason for this. She always minds her own business," Sakura said, turning away. "She probably likes to see me suffer. She knows nothing about me and still interferes. It's so annoying," the girl said angrily. "And all I want is for you to pay attention to me," she said quietly, with tenderness in her voice, and looked at the guy. "Seriously, I'm ready to do anything to win your respect." Sakura, red as a tomato, closed her eyes and began to slowly approach him, wanting to kiss him, but "Sasuke, it's time for us to go," he said coldly, rising to his feet, completely ignoring the pink-haired girl's actions. "Naruto is probably already there," the Uchiha added, turning his back to her, reminding her that they were now a team. "Don't change the subject," Sakura responded with an embarrassed giggle. "Does it even matter where Naruto is now?" she asked, looking at the back of her beloved. "All she does is cling and spin around you, acting like a guy," the girl said completely seriously. "And all because she doesn't have a mother, and her father simply doesn't have time for this misunderstanding." Spreading her hands, the pink-haired girl said, nodding to herself, confident 100% that she was right. "If I behaved like that, my parents would have told me a long time ago. And she just gets away with everything. Lucky, yes," the girl chuckled, without realizing it, touching the brunette's sore spot and pissing him off. "Do you even know what it means to be lonely?" Sasuke threw it dryly and harshly, causing the girl to flinch in fear. "It's better to be scolded than to be alone," he said bitterly, without turning around. "Naruto doesn't even know what the love and care of a mother is. And Minato, he does everything to support his only and beloved daughter. But can anyone replace a girl's mother?" Finally turning around, he said caustically, "Or father?" The guy added barely audibly and, measuring the shy girl with his gaze, said contemptuously, "You annoy me." Naruto nervously paced back and forth in the auditorium, where only 3 people remained, namely Team Number 7. Several hours had already passed, and the mentor of their team had not appeared, and this gave the blonde some rather joyful thoughts, because last time Kakashi was also late. But she did not feel the chakra of her beloved sensei, not like at the academy, nowhere in the village at all. And the girl didn't like this, because no one other than a copy ninja could lead this small detachment, which in the future promised to be equal in strength to an entire army of shinobi from all the hidden villages. "Naruto, calm down and sit down," Sakura said sternly, like a mommy, when she was finally fed up with the flickering of the orange spot around the classroom. "Why is our sensei so late?" the kunoichi said offendedly, pouting like a hamster, causing her first friend to laugh. "The rest of the teams left a long time ago. Even Iruka went home," the girl muttered under her breath. "Don't worry so much." The Nine-Tails barked in her head with a chuckle. All teams were distributed the same way as last time. Even the sensei and them are the same. "Which means that your loved one will be here soon." The tailed reptile laughed ironically, causing the blonde a slight migraine, which had long ceased to cause discomfort, having become a part of her life. "Well, if you say so, you damn trickster," the girl sang to herself, giggling maliciously, inserting a brush for the board between the door and the jamb. God! What are you? I have nothing to do with this! Sakura cried out. However, from her burning eyes the blonde understood. Her future friend was completely in favor. Pfft! Naru, I thought you came up with something grandiose, Sasuke drawled disappointedly, examining the primitive trap into which, in her opinion, the jounin should have fallen. Who said that's all? The girl thoughtfully remarked, listening to the measured steps along the corridor. However, she did not feel the chakra of their new sensei, but for some reason she was sure that she would see Kakashi. Minato's voice said menacingly when the copy ninja opened the door to the audience, deliberately falling into the trap of his eternal headache, who also happened to be his former ward. The Jonin shuddered and looked through a dense cloud of white dust to where the voice was coming from. The Hokage stood right in front of him, looking at his former student with an extremely displeased expression. Why were you so late for the meeting with your students? The man asked coldly, literally radiating a dissatisfied aura. You know, this is many times more fun than what it was then. The Kunoichi Kurama announced through laughter, falling into real hysterics. The main thing is that Dad doesn't find out what I used this scroll for. The girl answered, barely restraining herself from laughing. Hokage-sama? Standing at attention, the man said questioningly and, looking away, came across a pink-haired girl with big green eyes, frozen like an idol. She was wearing a red stylized dress with slits on the sides down to the hips and green tight shorts. Sakura Haruno, the only one from his team whom he did not yet know personally. It's part of my training, he reported, but hearing the quiet chuckles of Sasuke sitting at his desk, he looked slightly warily at his former sensei. It was definitely him, a stern but warm look of blue eyes, a soft half-smile and even a feeling of chakra. The only problem was the absence here, Naruto? I bought it. The blonde laughed, appearing in a puff of white smoke at the place where her father stood. How? That was all Kakashi could say, looking at the girl as if she were the eighth wonder of the world. Maelstrom Clan Fuinjutsu, Naruto said proudly and gave him a comic bow. How can I say this? He looked sourly at the students, the laughing Nara, who once again amazed him, Sasuke, who could barely restrain his laughter and had noticeably increased in height and chakra, and Sakura, who was still in a stupor, not understanding anything, but still smiling, and exhaled heavily. I don't like you. He knows you too well, Naru. The Nine-Tails laughed, having recovered a little from his hysteria. You three will turn his peaceful life into hell. He drawled ironically, anticipating the beginning of the most interesting thing. I won't mock my future husband, fox face. The blonde snorted. Well, maybe just a little bit. She added more quietly and looked at the one who was almost always with her both in this life and in the past. Come on, Kakashi-sensei. The blonde laughed. I know you're just joking. Slyly narrowing her eyes, she drawled, exactly copying the recent tone of her tenant, causing the copying ninja to break out in a sweat. So, okay, Hatake pretended to ignore her words, promising him a fun life. You two know me, and I know you well, so I'll ask you, girl, to introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself. The man said, looking sternly at the pink-haired girl, turning the topic into a different, more peaceful direction. Kakashi-sensei, maybe you're the first? Nara said with a smile, literally saving the hesitant Sakura. Oh, me? The man chuckled, leaning his elbows on the teacher's desk. My name is Kakashi Hatake. I won't tell you what I like and what I don't. Dreams. And I have a lot of hobbies. The copy ninja said confusedly, while normally only saying his name. And now you, girl, he said with a smile barely noticeable through his thick black mask. I'm Sakura Haruno, she began hesitantly. My dreams. Should I tell you what I love? She mumbled, looking sideways at Sasuke and blushing, not noticing how Naruto and Kakashi rolled their eyes at the same time. But I don't like Naruto Namikaze, Sakura added gloomily, glaring irritably at the blonde, causing her mentor to sigh heavily. Who would doubt it, huh? Kurama laughed caustically in the kunoichi's head, hearing the words of her friend, who in her past life was always jealous of her beloved. God, the platinum blonde rubbed his eyes, seeing how bad it was. Okay, tomorrow our team starts completing tasks, the man said in a mournful voice, but after a second he grinned. But first, the four of us will do something. He drawled slyly, looking at his new students in turn. What do you mean? Naru asked with feigned suspicion, suppressing another bout of laughter. Still, Uncle Jiraiya is a bad influence on you. She gasped and defiantly took a step back, noticing out of the corner of her eye how the always calm Sasuke could barely restrain himself from laughing. If Dad finds out. And she said, You won't mock me. Kurama laughed, seeing how Kakashi's face stretched out, slowly merging the color with his hair. No, Naru, I'm talking about something else, the man snorted, mentally hoping that this was her next joke. And don't you dare say that in front of your father, okay? He added somehow plaintively, imagining Minato-sensei's reaction to something like that and instantly remembering the massacre in the kitchen. I won't say. Only I will have a couple of conditions. The girl drawled, slyly squinting, in the best traditions of her lodger. Naru is still swaying you, Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke chuckled, having already missed such scenes. Agreed, closing his eyes, Hatake said barely audibly, realizing that again, as in her childhood, she was falling for this trick. Then finally stopped by for tea, the blonde sang with a wink, hinting that there he would find out her conditions. Naruto, I'm already starting to respect you. The Nine-Tails drawled contentedly and grinned, realizing that in the future his Jinchuriki would become a truly frightening woman. Okay, muttered the copy ninja and pulling himself together, continued where he left off. Tomorrow you will have a survival training, in which I will become your opponent, he said frighteningly quietly. Who won't pass it? We'll go back to the academy. Ha ha ha, he grinned maliciously, noting that only Sakura was afraid of this. Sasuke tensed slightly, but Naruto completely ignored his words, continuing to smile as if she knew everything in advance. The test will take place tomorrow at dawn. You will find out the details from the printouts, Kakashi said, giving them a stack of notebooks. And my advice to you, it's better not to have breakfast. He laughed and disappeared from the audience, leaving them alone. Chapter 18, Genin. Naruto walked with a cheerful gait towards the apartment where the last representatives of the Uchiha clan moved after the fall of the Uchiha clan. Sasuke, Itachi and Shursui. Following her, not far behind, were the other two members of Team Number 7. And if the pink-haired one simply glowed with happiness, then the guy, even by Uchiha standards, was too gloomy. And all because the kunoichi, slightly worried about the upcoming survival training, insisted on holding a small meeting with her teammates. Or rather, the blonde, under the strict guidance of Kurama with a sly smile, offered to sit with her childhood friend for a while, read the printouts and discuss them together, like a real team. Sakura, who simply wanted to see the house of her unfortunate beloved, nodded furiously, as Naru expected this, fully supporting this proposal. Per Sasuke, who has known Naruto for several years now, because of his own curiosity and fear of revenge, simply had no choice but to agree with the girls. But the kunoichi didn't care about all this. Now she and the Nine-Tails were trying to come up with a plan with which tomorrow they would have to defeat Kakashi. After all, if she was almost sure that, if she had exerted herself properly, perhaps she herself could have taken the bells from his belt. Then Naren knew for sure about her teammates there is no way they will be able to do this. And it was far from a matter of strength, abilities or knowledge that she took out from her past life and polished in this one. Rasengan, the Thunder God technique, shadow cloning and, like the icing on the cake, Fuinjutsu seals, which the blonde began to understand a little about. With the help of Kushina's notes, the kunoichi was finally able to experience the essence of this technique, which, according to Minato, only a true member of the Uzumaki clan could fully understand. And Naru, who is one of its last representatives, has already succeeded quite well in this art. She masterfully drew the simplest sealing scrolls, explosion seals, restraining seals, barriers, and even a few traps. But most of all, The girl was proud of the fact that she slowly delved into what even her brilliant father could not do, complex seals that required Uzumaki chakra to use. These techniques, passed down only within the Whirlpool clan, were their greatest value. It's a miracle that Kushina took these precious records out of her village, thereby allowing her daughter to continue the work of her ancestors. So, that was not the whole point. Naruto, not taking into account her past, knew Kakashi almost from her very birth. This was her only real trump card against the Jonin. And whether it would work on a man or not, the girl didn't know for sure. But her teammates were like blind kittens to him. However, it wasn't even about these bells, because even when she and Sakura grew up, they could barely get those damn bells. Tomorrow their team had to show their mentor well-coordinated teamwork, and this was the real problem. Maybe it's still worth giving up this pink-haired ballast that is always buzzing in your ear? The tailed man chuckled ironically, trying to defuse the slightly tense atmosphere. You and Sasuke have been training together since childhood, and she for you an annoying nuisance. The Nine-Tails laughed, jokingly voicing what Naruto already knew, but with all her heart wanted to correct. Stop mocking me, Kurama. The kunoichi snapped kindly at the demon, not appreciating it, but having heard her friend's joke. First, we need to understand which of us is capable of what and how it can be useful. The blonde said thoughtfully with a heavy sigh, mentally listing all the techniques that Sasuke knew. Well, this pink-haired boar can only lecture and give you and me some pretty powerful slaps on the back of the head. The tailed trickster drawled ironically, with slight resentment. But your Sharingan-bearing friend is pretty good with fire and kunai for his age, he said dryly, reluctantly, but still recognizing the most obvious of Sasuke Uchiha's advantages. God. The kunoichi moaned sadly. Well, we can't send Sakura to lecture Kakashi under heavy fire from shuriken and fireballs, while I quietly steal these damn bells, she said with obvious sarcasm, and immediately the fox perked up to the satisfaction of a chuckle. Or can we? The blonde giggled slyly. We just need to change the wording slightly. Naru, we're here! Sasuke's voice was heard right above her ear, and the girl suddenly realized that she was standing on the threshold of a small house where the last representatives of the Uchiha clan lived. Maybe you can finally explain to us the reason for this collection? With the brunette said curiously, looking at his friend, and opened the front door for the guests. What can she even know? Sakura snorted and, pushing the blonde aside, was the first to flutter into the house. Haruno, damn it! For the second time today. The blonde hissed like an angry cat, rubbing the hand that the girl had bruised again. Impudence second happiness. Kurama drawled philosophically with undisguised irony and, laughing, added, unlike you, this girl will achieve her goal, even if Kaguya herself gets in her way. He barked angrily, hinting at what he considered to be the most vile and vulnerable character trait of his Jinchuriki. Shut up, fox face! Immediately she angrily shushed her tenant Naru, who was once again touched by her friend's stiletto heel. I know what will happen at tomorrow's training, the blonde quietly answered Sasuke's question, following Sakura, causing both teammates to look at themselves in surprise. Or rather, what Kakashi wants to see from us, already the girl explained to them a little louder. And what? The brunette asked her with interest, to Haruno's nod of agreement, and finally slammed the front door behind him. Teamwork, my dear friends. Naruto returned home only a few hours later, when evening twilight had already fallen over Konoha. The girl's head was buzzing from arguments with Sakura, Sasuke's endless grunting and sarcastic comments from the prompter booth in her skull. But the realization that they still managed to find a compromise made the blonde incredibly happy. After all, this was another small step towards reviving the previous warm relations within Team Number 7. And the fact that Kakashi should drop by for tea at her house today warmed the soul of the young kunoichi in the body of a teenager. After all, over the last year, Naruto saw him only once, and then briefly, when he once again went on a mission. However, the way he appeared before his new team today pleased the girl. In fact, Hatake looked and acted exactly the same as in her past future, which meant his condition has returned to relative normality over the past 5 years. All the man's experiences, darkness and detachment were hidden deep inside, under a strong lock. And they had to break out of there only when he met Obito, or rather with what he became after communicating with that old senile Madara. And this meeting will take place, without the mask and role of the latter's jester, only at the end of the Fourth Shinobi World War, that is, no earlier than 5 years later. The girl spun on her heels, feeling how everything inside her was literally singing, and joyfully opened the faded front door. But what met her right on the threshold made the blonde flinch and intuitively take a step back. Right in front of her stood a pale, as if death, all disheveled Minato with dilated pupils. "It feels like your dad just met all 9 Bija at once," Kurama muttered somehow strangely, either mockingly or in surprise. And with that, they turned into the 10 tails. The girl assented to him, looking at her father with shock. "Dad?" the blonde already said out loud. "Naru, thank God you're okay," Minato suddenly shouted and literally rushed at his daughter with a hug. "I was so worried. I came home and you weren't there yet," the man said affectionately, hugging his daughter's fragile body to himself. "What are you talking about? I was only gone for a few hours." The girl chuckled, seeing her father so excited for the first time. "Naruto, it's almost 12 at night," Minato objected angrily, having calmed down slightly and was completely ready to reprimand his careless child. "It's a knock-up!" The 9 tails laughed in the blonde's head. However, he laughed somehow fearfully, because he would get her, it will hit him too. "I was with Sakura at Sasuke's house," the girl barely audibly responded in her defense, realizing that she was a little guilty before her father. "This is not an excuse," the man retorted. "I couldn't find a place for myself," he said sternly and added a little softer. "Honey, you know that, as a Jinchuriki and the daughter of the Hokage, you must be extremely careful?" "Yes, Dad," the girl said, lowering her head. "But now I'm a shinobi. And tasks, in principle, like people, are different," the adult kunoichi under the guise of a teenager said louder. "Right," the tailed one said offendedly in the girl's head. "Yes, and I can always grab your body and make it especially annoying." He laughed menacingly, causing a slight smile on the blonde's lips. However, having realized what exactly he said, the demon somehow became embarrassed and became quiet. "Why do you think it was Kakashi who became your mentor and teammate?" "Sasuke?" asked the blonde, causing the girl vague suspicions about the distribution of teams at this time. "So it's you!" Naruto shouted angrily. "I'm already an adult, and you still consider me a child." The girl hissed like a cat, glaring at her father. "Adults don't make their parents worry about themselves." Minato responded in a serious tone and, folding his arms over his chest, continued, "By the way, my dear, I was about to go look for you." "He would also send ANBU to look for you," the fox remarked ironically, finally emerging from the shadows after his shame. "You should have forced the ANBU to do this." The girl barked in the same tone as the fox, and her father shuddered suspiciously and turned slightly pale. "Exactly, they need to be told," the blonde muttered inaudibly under his breath. "God, don't say that's exactly what you did," the kunoichi muttered dazedly. "Here's a psycho," Kurama said with an understanding that was completely out of character for him. "Of course not," the man chuckled and smiled tensely. "Naru, don't talk nonsense, I couldn't do this," Minato said quickly and immediately added, "I urgently need to return to the residence. Urgent matters of the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village." His words were heard, while the man himself was vaporized using the Thunder God technique. "Wait! What about Kakashi?" Naruto shouted into the void, no longer doubting. Her father sent a squad of ANBU to search for her. "This is probably why Itachi never showed up at his home." "What about me?" asked a well-known male voice from behind her. "And why are you standing in the doorway?" Looking at his new student, he asked when Naruto turned her attention to him. "Never mind," the girl waved it off. "Dad is acting weird again," she said, shrugging her shoulders and immediately smiling at her sensei, causing the latter to sigh somewhat sadly. "That's putting it mildly." The 9 tails chuckled ironically from the prompter's booth. "Let's go inside, I'll pour you some hot tea and homemade cookies," the blonde sang with a radiant smile and, grabbing the guy by the hand, dragged him into the apartment. Kakashi, sighing heavily, humbly trudged after her, realizing that this one would not leave him so easily. Over the past year, during which he tried his best not to appear in her field of vision, hoping that she would finally burn out and forget about him as a man, this girl has grown noticeably. Although the copy ninja no longer dared to call her a girl. Over the course of a year, her figure went from angular, more suitable for a guy than a girl, to feminine. The shapes were slightly rounded, promising to become extremely seductive in the future. The facial features softened, making the girl even sweeter than in childhood, and her gorgeous golden hair had grown almost to her waist. Naruto, at 13 years old, had become an unusually beautiful teenager, forcing Kakashi to look at himself from a slightly different perspective. No, of course, there was no talk of any desire, but the warmth that enveloped his soul and heart when they met their gazes no longer resembled the feelings they had for their younger sister. "Sit down," Naruto announced in a commanding tone, pointing her sensei to a chair near the table, and rushed to the stove like a whirlwind, putting a massive kettle on the fire. "And he's obedient!" Kurama laughed mockingly, seeing out of the corner of his Jinchuriki's eyes how obediently the man sank into a chair. "You'll see, you'll tell him, get married and that's it, a bird in a cage." He laughed while the girl was looking for the remains of cookies that she had recently baked for the sake of experiment according to her mother's recipe. It turned out delicious, however, as always, and the blonde once again regretted that she had not cooked in her previous life. "Here's your favorite jasmine tea." Placing a steaming mug in front of the man, the kunoichi cooed and, moving the plate of cookies closer to him, sat down opposite him. "Just like a real wifey." Kurama chuckled ironically, however. Naru simply ignored this joke, taking it more as approval from the tailed one. "Well?" Hatake asked, looking at his new student, clutching a hot cup in his hands. "What?" The girl didn't understand. "What do you want for your silence, little blackmailer?" Resigned, Kakashi asked listlessly, not even thinking about trying the incredibly aromatic freshly brewed tea and rather delicious cookies. Naruto hesitated. She said something about the conditions, but she completely forgot to think about what exactly those conditions would be. "Kurama, come up with something not very eccentric, but something that will resonate, huh?" the girl asked her tenant as pitifully as she could. "Why me right now?" the Ninetales snapped. "Like cookies and tea, so to your beloved sensei or father, but how can you help so it's straight to me?" He chuckled offendedly. "How can I bring you tea into your inner world, huh? Genius!" The blonde snorted, not understanding at all what suddenly happened to her trickster fox. "In the future, when I was no longer locked up, I might do it at least once," the tailed one immediately retorted. "When this happens again, I promise to make you a lot of tea and bake a whole ton of cookies to go with it," she said, barely restraining herself from indignation, while continuing to smile at Hatake. "Now please help me. You're so smart and cunning." Barely restraining herself from screaming, she added affectionately. "Okay then," Kurama said contentedly, reeling from the compliments of his Jinchuriki and only friend. "Ask him to take off his mask," the nine-tailed demon said thoughtfully. "Well, or kiss," he added sarcastically, feeling the girl's cheeks flush. Kakashi silently watched Naruto, who had been silent for about 5 minutes, simultaneously glaring at him with some strange, empty look, while the wide smile did not disappear from her face. She seemed to think a lot about what she was going to tell him. And this gave the copy ninja not the most cheerful thoughts. And the apotheosis of his anxiety was Naruto's cheeks suddenly flushed with a bright scarlet blush and his downcast gaze. "Kakashi-sensei, can you?" The blonde spoke quietly, slightly embarrassed. The man shuddered and shivered slightly. "Can you take off your mask?" Looking up, she asked with naively wide eyes. "Eh?" the pale Hatake responded as he exhaled. "A mask?" he asked stupidly, looking intently at his student, and smiled. "You still deserve each other, couple." The tailed man burst out laughing, expecting exactly such a reaction from him. "No, Naru, we agreed that you will do it yourself when you become strong enough." Walking away, the man said calmly. I remember, snorted the kunoichi under the guise of a girl. I just thought it was a good chance, she muttered quietly. Don't be angry, just a couple more years and you yourself can remove this damn rag from his face. And kiss. Kurama barked encouragingly, again making Nara blush, it seems, no less than his Jinchuriki, wanting to see the face of this man. That's good, Kakashi said, smiling even wider through his ill-fated mask. Now I'll go, you have to get up early tomorrow, he laughed, and grabbing a couple of cookies, rose from the table. And don't forget, you shouldn't have breakfast tomorrow, he shouted seriously as he approached the front door. Don't worry, Kakashi-sensei, tomorrow you'll regret having breakfast. The girl drawled gloomily under Kurama's nasty giggle. Chapter 19 Survival Training, or Naru's fun life has finally begun. Naruto slowly walked towards the training ground, which from that day on was officially assigned to Team Number 7. The sun, which had already risen high into the sky, pleasantly warmed the skin, slowly driving away the coolness of the night from the streets. And around her, village life was already in full swing. Merchants were inviting passers-by to their shops, someone was in a hurry on business or was simply late for work, mothers were walking with their children. The girl knew very well that she was quite late for her first training session in the team, but at the same time I didn't see the point in rushing, enjoying a leisurely morning walk. After all, it was now only 9 in the morning, and Kakashi, fully confident that his students would carry out the order, would appear at the training ground no earlier than 11. Anyway, this time the kunoichi, after consulting with Kurama, decided to have breakfast and take a small snack with her for her teammates. Because she knew very well, it is difficult to think sensibly on an empty stomach, and in order to accomplish what they had planned yesterday, composure and sobriety of mind are necessary. Of course, she was a little ashamed that she did not warn her friends that she could be a little late and eat normally, but if she had done this, Sasuke would have had extra questions. And the blonde didn't want to lie to her almost brother one more time. I really wanted to. Turning off the busy street, Naruto, humming some melody stuck in her head, walked along a narrow alley, wanting to shorten the road a little. But when there were only a few hundred meters left before the entrance to the training grounds, her path was blocked by a boy with short brown hair and small black eyes. He was wearing a loose yellow t-shirt with the Konoha symbol on the chest, long gray shorts and blue sandals. The boy had a long blue scarf tied around his neck, which looked more like a cloak, because it trailed along the ground behind him. And on his head was an unusual gray hat. The boy, seeing the blonde, grinned widely, revealing to the world his missing front tooth, and stood up for battle. So we meet again, Naruto Namikaze. The boy shouted and immediately jumped up and rushed at the girl, but, getting entangled in his own scarf, fell right at her feet. I'm sorry, Konohamaru, but I can't play with you today. Looking at the floundering child, the kunoichi said apologetically. She met this boy again a couple of years ago, and sincerely hoped that they could become as close friends as the last time. However, he already considered her his boss, and asked her to teach her something interesting, which made her incredibly happy. I urgently need to go to the training ground. Today is my first lesson with the new team and sensei, she added enthusiastically, carefully walking around the boy, who had still not disentangled himself from his scarf. But Naru! He roared in protest, looking piteously at the one who was the only one of all who considered him an ordinary child, and not the grandson of the third Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village. Perhaps this was due to the fact that she herself was in a similar situation to him. True, this girl was not honored like him, but on the contrary they avoided and always whispered behind their backs. But for Konohamaru, she was the only close friend and teacher who, unlike Ebisu-sensei, taught him something interesting, without being afraid to scold him because of mistakes and failures. Sorry, come visit me in the evening, I have a small gift for you. The blonde smiled and quickly disappeared from the child's sight, knowing full well that if she stayed there, Kakashi would definitely come later, and this would ruin all her plans. How bad! The child is reaching out to you, and you. Kurama said sarcastically in her head as Naruto flew a few more turns in the first spaceship and found herself at a metal fence with barbed wire, on the door of which there was a large red inscription: Shinobi Training Grounds. Shut up, fox face, we're already late. Because of you, by the way. The kunoichi snapped at him, quickly sliding out the door to find herself in some kind of dense forest. Ara! Why is this because of me? The demon was sincerely indignant at these words, however, there was a hint of mockery in his voice. And what's the hurry? Your beloved sensei will arrive no earlier than in an hour. And we don't have to feed your friends. He snorted a little irritably, hinting at her softness. Who exactly decided to let me finally get some sleep today? The girl ironically asked the tailed girl, who, instead of the usual roar of the nine tails, was awakened by the gentle voice of her father, wondering why his daughter was still sleeping and where their breakfast was. But they just need at least a little snack. However, you yourself understand this very well, Kurama, she said sternly, quickly approaching the clearing, in which Sasuke and Sakura, furious as 1,000, loomed like dark shadows. It's only their problem. Blindly follow the commander's orders, pure water. The fox barked irritably at her words. We team, so now these are my problems too, Naruto said sternly, partly understanding why Kurama disliked Sasuke so much, because of whom his Jinchuriki suffered for a long time, and Sakura, who bullied her for most of their acquaintance, both at this time and in the past. Landing near her teammates, she smiled broadly at the gloomy teenagers. Good morning, the girls sang cheerfully, receiving their angry glances in response. Where have you been, Naru? The brunette chuckled, completely ignoring his friend's greeting. Why are you asking her? Without even allowing the blonde to open her mouth, Sakura climbed in, piercing her future friend with a hateful gaze. This one just overslept, the pink-haired girl snorted. I actually asked Naruto. Without even looking at the girl, the guy said, not taking his eyes off the still smiling kunoichi. What a tough little Uchiha! Kurama laughed ironically. Why does he even care where you were and why you were late? He hissed, which, coupled with the size and timbre of his voice, sounded extremely frightening. You, Kurama, no one asked? The blonde snorted, who was already starting to get annoyed by the sudden mood swings of her bijou. Actually, Sakura is right, Sasuke, the girl said, giggling stupidly, ruffling her long golden hair at the back of her head, which fell like a waterfall down her back. Is Kakashi not here yet? Looking around cautiously, she asked. Sensei is late too, the pink-haired girl said dejectedly, sitting down straight on the ground. I knew it. Naruto smiled even wider. You are probably hungry? Asked the adult kunoichi in the body of a teenager. We wouldn't be hungry yet. Kurama laughed, hearing the stomachs of his Jinchuriki teammates growl in unison. I hear you are right. The blonde laughed in tune with her tailed one and took out a couple of scrolls from her pouch. So, it's not in vain that I stayed a little longer, she sang and, under the dumbfounded looks of Sakura and Sasuke, turned them around. On the white sheets were two completely identical intricate seals, consisting of incomprehensible squiggles and lines, intertwining and forming something vaguely similar to the symbol of a whirlpool. Meanwhile, Naruto clapped her hands and said something quietly, apparently opening the scrolls, and portions of omelet and cups of hot tea appeared in place of the drawings. Please come to the table, Naru drawled, completely satisfied with the resulting effect. What kind of sealing seal is this? Sasuke asked his friend in surprise, looking at the fresh, still warm breakfast. This is one of the Fuinjutsu seals, Naruto said proudly. Now eat quickly, otherwise you will greatly regret it during training. She quickly added, hurrying her frozen teammates, because there was less and less time. But Kakashi-sensei said not to have breakfast. Under Sasuke's nod of agreement, the pink-haired woman began to cry sternly, but her eyes, burning with hunger, returned to food against her will. Well, no thanks to you. The kunoichi snorted to herself. I told you so. The nine-tails chuckled sarcastically in her head, almost openly mocking the blonde. What the hell? I know, but I'll still force them to eat. The girl drawled annoyedly, but after a second she smiled slyly. And Kurama, realizing that she had already come up with something, laughed rather, because he can quickly navigate in any situation is one of the most important survival skills. And in her past life, Nera learned this only at the very end of the war, miraculously surviving along the way. Well, first of all, it was actually a recommendation, not an order, the blonde said, clearly seeing that her teammates were almost ready to pounce on the food. Secondly, to defeat Kakashi, we need absolutely all our strength, the girl said confidently and added slightly mockingly. But if you don't want to, I can eat it all myself, and you just watch. Here we go! Kurama growled approvingly. I think I'll eat a little, Sasuke said, sitting down in front of the scroll on which the plate stood. Sakura silently moved towards her and carefully picked up her chopsticks. That's the same! The blonde giggled as she watched them gobble up the food she had prepared at the speed of light. After a couple of minutes, both plates and cups were clean, and Sasuke and Sakura were full and happy with life. Naruto put the dishes back on the scroll and, just like last time, clapped her hands and quickly made 5 seals. The scrolls were shrouded in a light haze, and when it cleared, the white sheets bore exactly the same seals as at the very beginning. I must say, this happened at the right time, since right behind the teenagers, the white chakra of their new sensei, familiar to Neru, flared. Here is your favorite. Confirming her fears, Kurama chuckled from the prompter booth, hinting that she should hurry up. Hi guys, the Jounin said good-naturedly. Naruto, hiding behind the backs of Sasuke and Sakura, quickly put the scrolls into her pouch, turned to him, and carefully looked out from behind the brunette's shoulder, checking to see if he noticed her actions. Everything was quiet. Good morning! Finally noticing his former ward, Kakashi said. You late? The genin responded in unison, glaring sternly at their new sensei. A black cat crossed the road, we had to go around, the blonde said with a smile, stoically enduring the displeased grunting of his students. It looks like it was a whole flock of cats. The Ninetales laughed, causing a slight tingling in his Jinchuriki's temples, which she didn't even pay attention to, glad that she managed to hide the evidence. Okay, the man chuckled, immediately losing all his goodwill, and put his watch on the stump. The alarm is set for noon, he said, and took 2 bells out of his pocket, showing them to the slightly surprised children. However, they were apparently not very impressed. And here are these 2 bells, your aim. In general, the task is simple: take them away from me before the alarm rings. Who can't do it will be left without lunch, he said with a grin, but unlike the previous commands that he was entrusted with, these stood quietly and looked at their new commander, even their stomachs were humbly silent. I will tie you to those pillars over there and I will eat in front of you, the Jounin said, waving his hand towards the 3 lonely posts, trying to convey all the salt to them, but the answer was also complete silence, and this was already quite annoying. It is enough for everyone to get 1 bell, but since there are only 2 of them, one of you will definitely be tied to a post, and again this damn silence and calm, as if what he told them did not touch the young shinobi of the Leaf Village at all. And one more thing. Anyone who doesn't get the bell will go back to the academy, he said dryly, looking them up and down, and finally 2 of the 3 genin shuddered, looking at the third in fear. Naruto was still smiling carefreely, seemingly not even noticing the tension that hung in the air. One got the feeling that the girl was sure that it would pass in any case. And yes, in my exam neither family ties nor personal attachments matter, you are all equal to me. The man chuckled, trying to intimidate the girl. Oh, how scary! Kurama chuckled ironically in the blonde's head. Look, Neru, his eyes are about to pop out of his head with indignation. Maybe we should play along? The tailed beast laughed, watching the man through the eyes of a Jinchuriki. It won't wait. At least not now, the girl said mockingly, slightly offended by the last words of her beloved. You can use shurikens and any shinobi techniques. Meanwhile, the man continued to speak, glaring at his new students. 'Cause if you don't try to kill me you won't see any bells. He grinned, for a moment becoming not the sweet and kind Kakashi, who likes to read all sorts of vulgar things, but a real A and BU captain. But Sensei, this is dangerous. Unable to bear it, Sakura squealed, starting to wave her arms like a frightened bird. Aren't you afraid, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto drawled, frighteningly quietly, which sounded extremely intimidating compared to the pink-haired one. To be honest, you don't exist. The Jounin snapped, measuring the girl with his gaze. However, the restraint was only on his face, but internally he shuddered, roughly imagining what else she could have learned over the past years. Naru herself slowly became wild, knowing full well that Kakashi was simply trying to provoke her. She was ready right now to take off and show him who to fear in the first place. After all, she had stopped being a loser a long time ago, around the time she was born. And he dares to say something like that to her face. No, undoubtedly, in comparison with him, the kunoichi was still weak and helpless, but such blatant disdain. Cool down. The fox barked in her head, interrupting the chaotic flow of thoughts, leading her to one action: attack Kakashi right now and prove your strength. Get your act together and kick his ass properly. Who was shouting about teamwork and sobriety of mind? The tailed one snorted, acting on his jinchuriki like a tub of cold water. You're right, Kurama. The kunoichi hissed, pulling herself together. Oh, in vain, the girl snorted out loud quite calmly. Well, I see you are ready to attack. The Jounin grinned predatorily through his thick mask. Hee hee. Looks like I'm starting to like you already. He smiled and immediately shouted, Start! All the genin immediately disappeared from the clearing to take their prearranged places at the evening meeting. Sakura hid in the bushes near the clearing where Kakashi remained standing. Sasuke hid on a massive branch in the crown of a tree, from where the area around the Jounin was completely visible. And Naruto, unnoticed by everyone, dived into a small river right behind her former mentor and current sensei. In fact, she was supposed to hide, like the brunette, in the trees in order to attack the shinobi from behind at the right moment, but she decided that jumping out of the water would be much more unusual. Hatake himself remained standing in the clearing, mentally thinking about which of the three would attack him first, because he was simply too lazy to look for his students. However, having known Nara for several days, he thought that she would attack him head-on because of his recent performance. But all three, despite small squabbles and almost obvious conflict within the team, worked synchronously, as befits a team. This made me happy and scared at the same time. Following the plan, Sakura was the first to jump into the clearing, completely discouraging the Jounin, who did not expect such a thing from this coward. She simply stood opposite him and began to watch closely, waiting for Sasuke's signal. A couple of seconds later, the sound of a woodpecker was heard from somewhere in the crowns of tall trees, meaning that everything was finally ready. Kakashi-sensei, I still think that such training is very dangerous for genin who have just graduated from the academy. The pink-haired girl began hesitantly, taking a small step towards the shinobi. We have never participated in real battles, but here we have a Jounin, she said more firmly. But Hatake didn't even pay attention to these words. He simply took out the book. Come, Paradise. From his pouch, and opening it began to read. Or rather, from the outside it should have seemed so, but in fact he was scanning the area, trying to understand what was happening and where Sasuke and Naruto were hiding. Kakashi-sensei, can you even hear me? Haruno snorted, realizing that her part of the task just talk. Banzai! Unexpectedly for the man, the blonde screamed, jumping out of the water, accompanied by a dozen shadow clones. Sakura shuddered and took a couple of hesitant steps back, while Kakashi, on the contrary, grinned, realizing that he was right after all, and prepared to attack. But instead of clones, he was attacked by a barrage of kunai from somewhere above. But what surprised the man even more, the kunai were followed by fiery attacks, which the Uchiha clan was once famous for. While he was fighting off throwing weapons and dodging fire, he noticed how Naruto's clones, led by the original, were slowly surrounding him from all sides. A dozen blondes surrounded him in an even circle, standing at the same distance from each other. They held their hands in the Tori seal and, closing their eyes, did not move, but without the Sharingan, which was hidden under his bandage, he could not recognize what this foolish girl was up to. Why open his eyes? Hatake couldn't even escape from this circle due to the continuous attacks of the younger Uchiha. However, even his favorite book was burning peacefully nearby, pierced by a couple of kunai. Is she too, Jean? The blonde said, looking up at him. Around the legs of each of the clones and her own, black circles appeared from various squiggles, which slowly increased, intertwining with the neighboring ones, thereby creating a whole chain that was getting closer to him with every second. A moment later, when the chain of symbols finally managed to touch his feet, the Jonin's entire body was constrained, as if he were tied with iron chains. Now! Naruto shouted, literally sweating profusely. Understood! Sasuke's voice was heard, and from somewhere above Kakashi a brunette jumped down, hugging his entire body so that even if he broke through the seal, he would not be able to move. Sakura! The girl hissed angrily, feeling her whole body shudder from such use of chakra. Despite all the efforts and hints from Kurama, the blonde still did not understand why she began to feel feverish when using her chakra. She definitely remembered that this was somehow connected with her seal, but the reason and the way to fix everything were completely erased from the girl's memory, and this upset her and incredibly angered the Nine Tails. However, in the absence of a better option, she could only use this one, hoping that later she would either remember the reason, or everything would resolve itself, as in her previous life. Moreover, this did not stop her from using shadow clones and the technique of the God of Thunder. Hold on, this weakling is already running towards him. No more than a minute left. Kurama's encouraging voice rang out in her head quite seriously, giving strength to the blonde. Sakura stepped onto the seal design on stiff legs, afraid, like their sensei, to get stuck in it, but as Naruto said, this seal did not react to her in any way. The girl quickly ran up to Kakashi and, tugging at the bells on his belt, froze, holding in her hands the thing for which all this was intended. We did it! Naru screamed with the last of her strength and immediately fell to her knees, releasing her seal. Yes, as a matter of course, Sasuke echoed her, releasing Hitaki from his grip. Did we defeat the Jonin? Sakura said, dumbfounded. Rather, it can be called the effect of surprise, but essentially yes. Naruto grinned, breathing heavily. Well done, Hitaki said somehow strangely, in surprise, and pulling himself together, added with curiosity. But which of you will be left without lunch and go back to the academy? I, Naruto said loudly. I will do this for the sake of the team and to avoid unnecessary squabbles. If Naru goes back to the academy, I will follow her, because this whole plan her. Sasuke chuckled, glancing briefly at the slightly surprised girl. But he's still not so bad. Kurama snorted, probably for the first time saying something good about the last, Uchiha. Yeah, the Kunoichi responded warmly. I will also return to the academy if Naruto does not go with me. After all, she did almost everything, and I just took the bells, Sakura said embarrassedly, surprising everyone with these words, even the tailed beast Kunoichi who cursed in his head. So you three team? The copy ninja said doubtfully. The Genins nodded. And I take it you three had breakfast? The Jounin asked just as gloomily, beginning to understand where the dog was buried. His students nodded in unison. Clear, he frowned, straightening up and moving away from Sasuke. You three. Looking angrily at his students, he said ominously, passed. After a pause, the man said joyfully. They passed. But how? We violated all your orders and openly opposed your decision. Haruno asked in disbelief, expressing Sasuke's question in her own words. You are the first, Kakashi responded warmly, looking at his new students, among whom was the one who had to pass, because with such a big heart it simply couldn't be otherwise. Everyone else did everything I told them. The man snorted contemptuously. Of course, a ninja must calculate everything in advance. And those who violate the laws of our world are often called pathetic nonentities, Hitaki said with a sad smile. But you know what? Those who don't care about their comrades. They are much worse. Hooray! Naruto screamed at the top of her lungs. Don't shout like that. It's not the first time. The fox snorted, however, his voice was extremely pleased at that moment. So, the training is over. Starting tomorrow, Team number 7 begins completing tasks, Kakashi said proudly. Maybe, like our new sensei, you can treat everyone to ramen? The girl drawled curiously, staggering to her feet. Well, okay, Hataki chuckled, smiling widely through his black mask. At the same time, tell me what kind of barrier this is. It can be seen that it was Fuinjutsu, but it was clearly slightly altered. Chapter 20 First Rank C Task, or Tazuna from Wave Village. Naruto sat in the bushes in the dense forest that surrounded Konoha in a dense ring on all sides, and was frankly bored. Somewhere on the periphery, the chakra of Sasuke, Sakura and Kakashi was felt, who, like herself, sat in ambush, waiting for their target to appear. Cats of the wife of the ruler of the country of fire, Mrs. Shurjimi. Although, in fairness, it should be noted that their careless sensei, being the commander of this small detachment, simply sat in the distance on a stone and oversaw the entire mission. Or rather, in between reading vulgar novels, Jiraiya sensei gave valuable instructions to his foolish students, as if they were catching this fiend of hell for the first time. For the third time in the measly months since they graduated and became team number 7, they had caught that damn cat that belonged to their daimyo's wife. The tiger cub, as Mrs. Shurjimi lovingly called her, ran away from her with enviable regularity, and Naru, to some extent, understood the reason for such actions of the animal. This woman was truly terrible in showing her love, because of which one could only feel sorry for the ruler of the country of fire. However, the fact that she understood why the cat ran away from her owner did not mean that she did not irritate her. After all, besides them, during this month, this hellish creature was caught several times by almost all the teams from its release. Because of this, the blonde, and probably all the genin of the Hidden Leaf Village, began to get the impression that this woman was deliberately releasing this uncontrollable animal in order to provide work for all the new shinobi. Hey, maybe you'll use our secret weapon already. Otherwise, this forest is really starting to piss me off. Kurama growled irritably in her skull, seemingly already brought to the boiling point by this repeated D-rank mission as if in a vicious circle. I think you're right. The girl responded in the same tone, taking out from her pouch a small bottle that she bought this morning at the pharmacy. In fact, Naruto in her past life, after the Fourth Shinobi World War, recalled these tasks with nostalgia, sincerely believing that they were, to some extent, even fun and carefree. Now the kunoichi could swear that catching this cat would be worse than fighting Kaguya herself, Obito and Madara at the same time. But everything could have been much simpler, the girl said distantly, pouring liquid from the bottle onto a small rag. Are you talking about your Undersage mode? The Nine-Tails snorted, hinting at his Jinchuriki's ability to sense natural energy. After all, if she just concentrated a little now, she could find even the smallest beetle in this forest, let alone some cat. You're right, Naruto, but for now we'll have to make do with the Matatabi. He yawned, intending to take a little nap, because nothing interesting could definitely happen now. The blonde just sighed heavily and began waving a rag soaked in liquid, trying to spread the smell of grass to lure this damn cat. Attention everyone, the goal has finally appeared. Kakashi's voice came through the earpiece, letting the girl know that her plan had worked. Report the situation, he added sternly, playing the role of a stern commander. It feels like you're not catching a cat, but some kind of enemy shinobi, the tailed trickster said ironically in a sleepy voice. Sits, fox face! Naruto hissed to herself, as if his voice in her head could scare her away. 5 meters, the target is approaching quickly. I'm ready. The kunoichi reported, as if she was really ready to rush to catch the cat, and not just sit and wait for the cat to come to her. Me too, Sasuke's muffled voice came through the earphone. And I, Sakura echoed him warily. Fine, Kakashi said approvingly, already ready to give command to his squad. I have a goal. The blonde interrupted him when the cat calmly approached her and, climbing onto her knees, began to greedily sniff the rag and rub against her orange jumpsuit. Naruto, I haven't given my order yet. Her sensei barked indignantly, to the agreeable chuckles of the others, whom the blonde had deprived of at least some kind of entertainment. God! You would think that you were catching a real tiger, really risking your life. The Nine-Tails grinned, and added more quietly. Get off to the city already. Grab that drunkard and go on a normal mission. Given what's going on, do you think Dad will let me go to the land of waves? The kunoichi asked with obvious doubt, remembering what tasks they initially received because of him. Minato, driven by concern for his daughter, did not allow their team to go even outside of Konoha, sending them exclusively on the simplest missions, but she came to me herself. The girl cried out indignantly, in order to somehow justify herself to him and her teammates. So make him. You are our master of manipulation of the fourth Hokage. Kurama laughed sarcastically and added his favorite, Okay, Naru, check that she should have a ribbon with her name on her ear, and let's wrap up, Kakashi said as he exhaled. Fuck you, fox face! The blonde snorted, rising to her feet, and immediately said out loud, Eat! Merging his voice with Sasuke and Sakura. Team number 7 stood in full force in the Hokage's residence, in the middle of a large hall with a panoramic window that spanned the entire wall. Directly in front of them was a long table, behind which sat Minato, dressed in a white cloak and kage hat. He methodically sorted through some scrolls with an extremely serious look, seemingly not even noticing the presence of strangers in the hall. To the left of the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village sat a slightly thoughtful Irika-sensei, who looked at his graduates with some warmth. And a little further away from them were a couple of accountants, to whom a couple of minutes ago Mrs. Sure Jimmy gave a rather generous payment for the task completed and, continuing to smother her tiger cub in her arms, left the hall. Well done, Team Kakashi! Finally looking up from reading, Minato said cheerfully, attracting everyone's attention, and barely smiled at his daughter. Your next task will be… Returning his gaze to the scroll, he ran his eyes over it, and, seeming to have found something, looked again at the team, 3 of whom were like children to him. You will have to babysit the elder's grandson, go shopping in a neighboring village and help harvest potatoes. Minato informed them with a wide smile. However, from the sour expressions of Sasuke and Naruto, it immediately became clear what exactly they were thinking about this choice. Even Kakashi subtly exhaled heavily, because after what kind of missions he had been assigned for the last couple of years, these must have looked like a joke. No, no, and no again, Dad! The girl literally howled, taking a step forward, to the synchronized dejected sighs of her commander and father, who had long expected something similar from their former ward and daughter, respectively. Kurama growled sarcastically in the kunoichi's skull. I definitely won't survive another mission to catch this abnormal animal. And then you will understand the difference between me and a crazy psycho. He laughed loudly, feeling how the girl shuddered internally, presenting this picture in all its colors. Calm down. I won't miss meeting Zabuza and Haku for anything. The kunoichi in the body of a 13-year-old teenager said confidently to herself, proudly looking at her shy daddy, who had already realized that his daughter would not give up. The 9 tails in her head only grinned, because even despite the fact that Naru, like him, was clearly tired of simple tasks, it was not only about them. Kurama understood perfectly well what exactly this task meant for his Jinchuriki and her team. Firstly, this is true teamwork, where everyone must understand the thoughts of their comrade without words covering his back, where the lives of its participants are much more important than the success or failure of their mission, where orders fade into the background if someone, even the commander himself, is in danger. Secondly, Zabuza himself and his little subordinate, who reminds the tailed one more of a weak girl than a guy, Haku. These two made Naruto realize how weak she was physically and how strong she was mentally, showing the girl that even the strongest shinobi, who has killed hundreds of people, can turn out to be weak and helpless when he loses the only person dear to him. Proving in practice how disgusting the life of a ninja really is if there is no one in it for whom he can fight. Even if it is a bloodthirsty maniac killer, a beloved rival, friend or sensei. Yes, even the whole world, which does not want to accept you. And thirdly, this mission allowed the girl, albeit unconsciously, to still fall in love with Kakashi, who risked his life to protect his students. Not as a sensei, a strong shinobi or a friend, but as a man. I want a normal task. The girl stamped her foot and growled like a tailed one to Sasuke's approving nod, Sakura's indignant sniffling and another sigh from the copy ninja. And, narrowing her eyes slightly, she added more quietly, "Awesome task, Dad. You're still just a beginner." Iruka shouted, jumping up from his seat, unable to withstand the next whims of his most problematic student, but realizing what exactly he said to the girl in front of her high-ranking father, he looked back at him warily. "I heard you're new to us." Kurama drawled sarcastically in her head and burst out laughing, knowing full well that in her past life this girl had seen more than all those present combined. "The only question is, what exactly can a shinobi learn by digging potatoes?" He snorted ironically, and the blonde only by an effort will refrained from laughing. A lump stuck in her throat. Everyone starts with simple tasks, gradually moving on to complex ones. Realizing that no one was going to kill him, Iruka continued in a mentoring tone. "But for some reason, it's our team that gets the lousiest tasks." The girl retorted with a withering glance at Minato, understanding perfectly well where the dog was closed. In a past life, Team Number 7 was also given D-rank tasks. But they were no comparison to what they were assigned now. Yes, boring and simple, but those missions at least vaguely resembled the work of a shinobi. But now, for a month now, Naru was literally toiling with idleness, because going to the store for the old lady and walking a couple of dogs was difficult to even call a mission. Even catching that damn cat, compared to everything else, was like a holiday for Naru. "It's just funny, the girl continued to perform, but unexpectedly she felt the ground disappearing from under her feet. Nervously screaming and looking around, the girl suddenly realized, instead of the slap on the head that the kunoichi was expecting, Kakashi shook her and picked her up like a princess, just like the day when she realized that she loved him from her past life, making the blonde blush the tips of the ears and a limp doll with a blissful smile to hang in the arms of a loved one. "Shut up already, daughter-in-law," the commander quietly hissed at her, finally finishing off the girl, whose heart was ready to pierce her ribs and jump out of her chest from the sudden onset of euphoria, under the stunned glances of everyone. Naturally, in addition to her father and best friend, who understand perfectly well what kind of relationship she and Naruto have, which has developed since the blonde's childhood. Or, more simply, they know that this absurd girl loved him, and the guy accepted these feelings with horror and hopelessness and all the bullying that comes with it. "RR, get yourself together, Rag!" The fox growled, almost laughing in a mocking tone, openly mocking the embarrassed girl. "It looks like your loved one took advantage of your favorite scheme." Still, unable to bear it, the nine-tailed man said through wild laughter, no longer causing the girl the previous discomfort. "Naru, it seems that, despite your extraordinary intelligence, you do not quite understand what Iruka meant." Minato spoke quietly, to the surprise of many, without even paying attention to the words and actions of his only surviving student, looking carefully at his daughter. "The village receives hundreds of requests every day, from banal babysitting services to cold-blooded murders," he continued to say. However, judging by the expression on his daughter's face, still hanging in Kakashi's arms, she didn't care. All these tasks are sorted according to their degree of difficulty into categories A, B, C, and D, and accordingly are written down in these scrolls, pointing to what he was looking at so carefully a couple of minutes ago, Minato said, hoping that Naruto could hear him. But, apparently, only Iruka listened to this explanation, while those to whom, besides his daughter, these words were intended, namely Sasuke and Sakura, continued to stare at the surreal picture in front of them. And if the girl did it somehow with envy, the guy looked on with a barely noticeable smile. Minato, closing his eyes tiredly, continued, "The ninja of the village, in turn, are also divided by strength into ranks: Hokage, Jonin, Chunin, Genin, and students of the Shinobi Academy. And each of them receives their tasks in accordance with their rank: Jonin A, Chunin B and C, and Genin's C and D. Simply put, difficult missions experienced shinobi, simple missions newbies. Your daddy something." Meanwhile, Kurama laughed, tearing the blonde out of her ephemeral world where she had been before. Only he could manage to expose his paranoia as something that is the unspoken law of the village. He grinned, forcing the girl to listen to the words of her father, who at that moment was talking about shinobi ranks. Here is the fox. The girl hissed to herself and immediately broke into a wide smile, clasping her commander by the neck. Kakashi, will you come to our house for tea today? The kunoichi sang sweetly, attracting the attention of her entire team, who, with half an ear, still listened to the Hokage's words. Today I will bake a mega cool pie according to my mother's recipe, she said enthusiastically and, looking at her teammates, added, You guys come too, Daddy. Hey, who am I explaining this for? Unable to bear it, Minato barked, knowing full well that Naruto did it out of spite, but he couldn't help himself. The antics of his daughter, like his wife's antics before, he, always a calm and restrained person, simply could not stand it. As a result, he did exactly what these women wanted. For the ceiling. The tailed trickster drawled mockingly and laughed disgustingly. Sorry, Minato-sensei, rubbing the back of his head, Hataki said quickly, but stopped in the middle. Sorry, Hokage-sama, damn, Dad. The blonde snorted, interrupting the apologies of her sensei, who seemed to have decided that another reprimand awaited him today, and in a second she jumped from the arms of her future husband. As she and Kurama called Kakashi, and scowling like an evil hamster, glared at her father. All you do is say, considering me a child, unable to stand up for myself, and protecting me like some kind of person. The girl shouted, glaring at her father with an angry look. But I think you're forgetting that I'm already quite strong and I'm a genin. She snorted and added more quietly. I'm no longer the lazy and hooligan I was before. That's right, Naruto, we'll show them all later. The fox chimed in proudly, completely agreeing with the Jinchuriki's words. The entire room was plunged into oppressive silence, where everyone was thinking about something different. Iruka was touched by how much this girl had grown and changed in a month, trying to realize herself through deeds, not mischief. Sakura was angry at this blonde girl who yelled at the Hokage, and it didn't matter that he was her father, because now they were like a team here. Sasuke mentally supported his friend, sincerely believing that she was quite strong, and their team could cope with a C rank or even B rank mission. Kakashi was mentally preparing himself for the fact that he would be called on the carpet to once again tell how he was not coping with his responsibilities, as it was before, when Minato consistently complained once a week that the mentor could not curb the naughty child. The funny thing was that even he himself could not do this, expecting a miracle from the guy. Which, for obvious reasons, did not happen. Minato sadly realized that his daughter was right again, and he was obliged to give them a normal task. After all, Naruto was indeed quite strong, not taking into account her problems using chakra, which were associated with his own seal. And next to her will be Kakashi, a former ANBU captain, who received this title not at all for his beautiful eyes, and Sasuke, already quite strong and cold-blooded shinobi for his young age. Okay, yours took it, Naru, Minato said gloomily, looking at his overjoyed daughter and her surprised teammates and captain. If that's what you want, I'll give you a task of category C, the Hokage said with a serious look, looking in turn at the long faces of the genin and one jounin, and again returned to the joyful face of his beloved daughter. You will have to protect one person. Naruto, I didn't doubt you! Kurama laughed approvingly in her head, realizing that they had succeeded after all. Yeah, fox face! The girl nodded mentally. And this time neither Haku nor Zabuza will die! She added rather harshly, surprising the Ninetales, who for the first time heard that she wanted to save them, because they were Nukanins who had killed a lot of civilians. Wait, what? For what? The tailed one clarified in surprise, which was completely out of character for him. Calm down, Kurama! The girl grinned, pleased with the effect obtained, and the fox snorted angrily, realizing that he was caught. I'm not going to indulge them, much less lose. I just don't want to bring everything to what happened. And now I should be able to do it. She drawled slyly, and added out loud, Hooray! Who will we protect? Now I will introduce you, Team Kakashi. Minato smiled just like his daughter. Please come in. A rather overweight gray-haired man in glasses with a large beard and dark eyes blurred by alcohol stumbled into the hall, and there was no other way to say it. He was wearing a V-neck shirt with cut-off sleeves, tied with an obi belt, dark trousers and a pair of rather dusty sandals. He had a towel tied around his neck and a pointed cap on his head, and in his hand the man clutched a half-empty bottle of wine. "Who else is this?" he asked listlessly, looking around at team number 7. "Some kind of kindergarten." The man snorted as Naruto's inner demon growled. "Especially the smallest one, with the stupid face." "Hey, maybe we can kill him ourselves in passing?" Kurama growled, hurt that some pathetic person dared to say something like that about his girlfriend and the Jinchuriki, considering that this blonde had changed dramatically since her previous life, becoming more neat and feminine. "We'll make friends with Zabuza at the same time, huh?" he asked. "No, Kurama, we will take revenge on him in another way." The girl snorted offendedly, having already forgotten how exactly her acquaintance with this man went. "Oh, are you talking about me?" the blonde said softly, causing her father and Kakashi to tense up, knowing full well what this could lead to. "She is the daughter of the Hokage of this village," Sasuke said loudly, trying to either protect or stop his girlfriend. "What do I care?" he snorted, taking another sip of what, in the opinion of everyone present, had completely killed his sense of self-preservation. "No, I will definitely kill him." The blonde roared no worse than the fox himself, ready to rush at the man. "That's right, show him who the kids are." Kurama assented to her. "Wait, we should protect him, not kill him, Naru." Grabbing her by the collar of her overalls, Kakashi said quietly, with a bit of disappointment, feeling the sad sigh of Minato, who himself wanted to punch this man a couple of times. "I Architect Tazuna, bridge construction specialist," he responded with a drunken smile, ignoring everything that was happening. "I hope you will protect me well until I get to the land of waves and finish building there."